Simon,
Oliver.
how long? Nice. I'm so glad we do this. I'm so glad we get to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been what 10, 11 years now.
11 years.
Yeah.
11 years, and we've been talking all yesterday. We've been talking all a few like an hour now. An hour coming here. Yeah, it's so nice.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Because we've been friends for 11 years, and that's when I was in college in Ottawa, and you recruited me to do the student painting franchise.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's start there, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that was quite the good times, right? Yeah, the student painting business for me, and I think for you as well. It was sort of the foundation to a lot of stuff that we have now in real estate with Engel Völkers, and that's another thing that's been very cool. Is we over the last couple of years we didn't really talk that much, but we both ended up working for the same company.
Yeah.
And
but you do residential more, right?
Exactly.
In Ottawa with your wife. Nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do you see that going? Like where do you want to go with that?
Well, I started with Engel Völkers. It was 2 years ago now. Actually, I started working with them in Mexico in Playa del Carmen.
Yeah.
And that was in January 2022. And I worked with them there for almost a year before we went back to Canada. And Dale was working with Engel Völkers in Canada for a couple of years, since I think a year after they opened up in Ottawa.
That was when, like 2017, 2016.
I think Dale it was 2017.
Started almost as at the same time as me.
She started before that,
but she went to Engel Völkers when I was already there.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. Cool. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is there just these three mics on, or is there another one that's on? Because I hear an echo.
Oh, okay. Wait, this one. No, it's just you have the same. There's only
Those are the only three on.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
Never mind.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe I'm talking too loud.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
I was wondering if there's one on the floor that's over here. It sounded like it was picking up something.
Oh, no, it's not picking up anything. No, it's close.
Okay.
All right. Well, fuck that. What are we saying?
Yeah. So Engel Völkers, that was So it's been 2 years, and where I see that going, I mean, we want to build a team. Essentially, that's so we set it up as a team from the day one with Dale. She's been in business for 8 years as a realtor. She's excellent at customer service. I always told her, I've been joking with her. I've been telling her for years, you're the best realtor. She's actually the best realtor that I know. Very attention to detail. Very, very good with the clients. But she was never one to market much. And my background, not being real estate sales, but being marketing and sales in general in the renovation business. My background was to, generate the leads, set up the CRM, and set up the systems to create that flow. So right now we're sort of mixing that up together. She's taking care of her side, and I'm taking care of my side. I bring in the business. She takes care of it, and it's been like that since day one together.
Nice.
She, takes care of all the paperwork, and we really have like a sort of this like very good, partnership together, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, you were telling me. Yeah. That was nice. You were telling me you were getting a lot of leads from a home show.
Yeah, the home show has been something that I did almost 30 different trade shows in the past in the renovation business.
Yeah.
I started out in the painting business. I think I did my first one. And then after that, I did them every single year for many years.
You kept going because I remember we did a few with the student painting business, but you kept going, and Dan kept going too. But for some reason, I never thought it could apply to the realtor.
You know what it is? It's you're setting up your booth, and although those are renovation shows, you get thousands and thousands of people walking by your booth.
It's actually good
that own a property.
Yeah.
And every single every single person that we meet at the trade shows in real estate are people that they tell us, I wasn't expecting to meet you guys there, but great, we're happy that we met you, and then we established very good relationship with clients and also with other exhibitors. You're in a room where there's hundreds of different business owners that are there to promote their businesses.
Yeah.
So that's another very good opportunity in the trade shows.
Big networking opportunity.
It's a very big networking. I've met so many people that are now in my life in those different trade shows.
I have to do that.
Yeah, it's a very good foundation. Anyways, we do. We're gonna do 4 of them next year, and it's really gonna be. Is
everything okay?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So.
Oh, cool.
That's
all right.
better.
That's much better. Yeah.
It's driving me nuts. Sorry.
It's all good.
Now it should sound way clearer.
Yeah. You want to start over?
No. We'll keep it. It's fine.
Just,
we don't add anything, but I knew I
Yeah.
could hear something. I just couldn't figure out what it was.
I couldn't hear it. This is
So the trade shows were
Nice.
great,
And then
man.
bring that mic a little closer to you so I can hear you better.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Excellent.
perfect.
Cool.
All right.
That's why she's here, because I would have never.
There you
noticed.
go. That's what we were talking about earlier. You know, you need the expert in the room. We're not experts at anything.
so lucky.
Yeah. So yeah, that's been the progress. You know, it's a lot of fun, and we're definitely hoping to continue building. Eventually, we'd like to come down here in Miami. That's one of our goals in the long term, anyways, to retire, sort of half Ottawa, Canada, and half Miami, or around here, anyways, in Florida. I think it's an easy one, right? We're so close. It's a couple hours on the flight. We had a straight flight from Ottawa, and so we left our house. It was 5 a.m. By the time we got to the airport and everything, we got here was 10:30, 11.
Yeah, it's
ready
cool.
to go.
It's super close. It works very well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, love Miami. Yeah.
And then the crazy thing is, there's a lot of business to do in Canada that is happening here, because the heads of the largest business are always coming here in the winter time. Always.
Yeah. So we're trying to focus, and probably we're not going to do this now. This is probably like a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still young. Still got a lot of time to do things and to set things up, and yeah.
It's nice that it's actually you told me something the other day that makes me appreciate more what you've done over the years, because you really started at nothing, at the base, at the zero, like outside of civilization almost.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting because this is something I had sort of put behind me in a way. I did have a lot of a very different childhood, and I left my parents. I was 16, and then I started my first business, or I started sort of in the business of sales and marketing at the age of 18. And in those 2 years, I traveled a bit, and then I continued doing that, and it's been a very long progress or process, if you will. I transformed a lot over the years. But yeah, when we say start from zero, it was below zero, on a lot of very simple things. I grew up with no electricity, no running water. So it was just sort of this completely different childhood. We were on a 100-acre property located roughly about 30 minutes from a very small town called Fort Collonges. That's about a 2-hour drive. Fort Collonges, Quebec.
He always told me, I was asking him where he was from, and he was always saying, it's just past Fort Collonges.
Just 2 hours.
Just past Fort Collonges. But I had no idea that past Fort Collonges had nothing up to until the North Pole.
Yeah, so essentially Fort Collonges is located, so it's sort of like, you've got sort of, it goes like down the Ottawa River, or the Fleuve Saint-Laurent.
Yeah.
That meets the Ottawa River, and sort of the population in Quebec and Ontario are located like Quebec City on the river, and then you go down a little bit towards the west, and you got Montreal. Then you go a little bit more west, and you have Ottawa, and then you go south towards Toronto. Toronto's a lot more south than it is. So, but if you continue going a little bit,
nothing.
Yeah. So if you follow the Ottawa River, Ottawa. It's a little bit sort of like northwest of Ottawa, and then that's sort of the edge of Quebec, essentially, right?
Edge of Quebec and edge of Ontario.
Exactly, or of the population of Quebec. I was looking at a map of where I was from, and essentially you have sort of like all of like it's colored in 2 colors, and you have the green areas which are protected lands, And then you have like all of the red areas that are sort of like the population or inhabited land.
Yeah.
And then you have this little tail end, like a little peak, at the end here. And at the very tip of that, that's where we were. So you walked out of the property, you were on Crown land, and you basically could have walked to the North Pole without setting foot on private property.
Yeah, the crown land is in Canada, the land that is still owned by the
government.
By the government.
So it's protected lands.
Yeah.
They can use it for cutting down wood and
resources.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And for resources.
That's almost all of it, because
exactly there are some protected areas, right?
Of Canadian population lives within 100 kilometers of the border with U.S.
Exactly.
So it's super. It's very, very tight.
It's very
There's
tight, and
nothing,
it's also along the rivers and lakes.
Yeah.
So you got a lot of population along like Toronto is along the Great Lakes, and you have along the Fleuve Saint-Laurent. You got Quebec City, Montreal. Those the two largest
Three Rivers
cities. Yeah, exactly. Three Rivers, and then you have
Yeah.
Ottawa also along the Ottawa River. So we were up the Ottawa River. Fort Collonges is like an hour and a half to 2 hours north up the Ottawa River on the Quebec side, and then we were located about 30 minutes north from that on a dirt road, and basically that there was at the time, and now there's more people living there, but at the time there were only cottages on that road, so. Over the years, my parents sort of forced, they were, very good, with their stuff. They forced the municipality to open up the road during the winter, because when my dad lived there alone, before my mom moved there with him and they had kids, it wasn't opened up during the winter. So my dad was, he lived there from the age of 18.
Holy shit.
That was actually my grandfather's hunting cabin on that property. And my dad moved there at the age of 18, and then he stayed there for forever. Still to this day, he's still there. And
without electricity, running water.
Exactly. Like now they have solar
anything.
panels, and they have sort of like there is a water system that works, for most of the year until it freezes very, very until it's like deep winter. So when I was young, we would basically carry water with buckets of water every day. That was one of our chore, because we were, in the mountains, right? So you had some sources of fresh water that came down the mountain that were very potable water. We just filtered with a Brita, and it was very good water. We had huge gardens.
That's the best, yeah.
Yeah, we had huge gardens.
The water from the
It's
creek
actually
in Canada is the best.
It's the best.
Fucking
Yeah.
best water, yeah.
Yeah. It's very good. You can taste the minerals. It's so fresh, and you can't have better than that. So I grew up on fresh water.
Same.
Grew up very healthy. Fresh water in the woods, eating wild meat. We had some animals as well. So we had some sheep, goats.
You guys
over the years.
Hunting, I'm assuming.
Hunting,
yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of deer. A little bit of moose, a little bit of bear. Small game as well, right? So when I was a kid, I would go out.
The mic, like right there.
Okay.
On a little, yeah. Like
Yeah. So
nice.
when I would go out, I would essentially, about 12 years old, I got my hunting, license in Quebec. How to work with a gun and
so
stuff.
you had your first gun at 12, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was registered to my parents because I never got my license to own a gun. I just got, I could use it. So yeah, and I started hunting, and it was sort of like very different. Like, I went to preschool at the age of 5, like every other kid.
Yeah.
And then I went to school in the village. So we had this like private transportation that would come and pick us up. It was like a car just for the three of us.
So how many students were in, you said preschool, so this is a small village essentially.
Yeah, so it's a small village. So there are kids that were coming from a little bit around it.
Mm-hmm.
We were, I think, in elementary school, we were the furthest out that would come. But then the high school for the whole region was in Fort Collonges. So there were guys like Dan that I met, at the high school that would come out like 45 minutes away, but more towards Ottawa. So we were like, more in the woods, but there were other little villages around the area, and everyone. And so the high school we had about like 500 students. at the time in the
It
high
was
school.
about the same size as me.
Yeah, exactly.
600 as for
Yeah,
guys,
and then
600.
elementary school is smaller. I don't know how many people, but we had maybe a class of 30 students per, or 40 students per age, right? So it was very small elementary school. But it was very interesting because I lived sort of a double life for my entire
Well,
childhood.
yeah, I didn't know that until 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, he called me. He's like, I've got the craziest story.
Yeah. Well, what happened is this, okay? Okay.
It's like I was so mad. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Where was that all the time we were friends?
So what happened is this, okay? So I was taught, my parents basically, it's a very private type of lifestyle, right?
Of course.
You're sort of secluded from everyone. You're also very different from everyone. So, you allow some people into your life, but there's a lot of people that don't vibe with sort of being self-sufficient. My parents, some people they thought we were poor. I remember, a lot of sort of organizations would go to my parents and give them food. But, we had so much food.
You were living off the land.
We had so much food. We had years worth of food, right?
Years.
Well, it was just that's the way of living.
Yeah.
You produce, you can serve, and there's always once you're set up, there's always animals providing, right? So I grew up on fresh goat milk. Every morning we would basically milk the goats. I didn't do it a lot. My dad would do that. Pick the fresh eggs from the chicken. Once a year you gotta butcher the chicken. And same thing for different animals, and there's always meat, lots of vegetables. It was a very, very healthy lifestyle and large quantities of it. So I grew up very, very healthy with lots of, very nice environment. My parents did a very, very good job. I didn't think so at the time. And that's essentially what happened is
You're a kid.
I was a kid. So I rebelled, a little bit rebelled against my parents. I left and I didn't talk to them for a while after I left because I didn't think at the time that it was fair for me because I grew up, I was going to school, talking to my friends. I couldn't relate to what they would talk about. Mm-hmm. So I was a very quiet person from the very young age because I stopped talking because they couldn't understand me. I couldn't understand them. So it was sort of this weird thing that after the age of 6 or 7 years old, I didn't talk about anything to anyone. It was like nobody knew. We had that conversation at the restaurant the other night, and Dan is the one that knows me the most, and he's like, I never heard so much.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was so surprised. Then even Dan was like, "Holy shit, that's the."
Yeah. So what happened is at the age of 16, I left. I did my own thing, and then I'm basically I discovered that over the years, but I was trying to create the opposite. I think everyone does that a little bit. You're very similar. You come from the woods. You come from, and you're trying to blow up in the world and create a big impact. And I think it's a very common thing. People trying to do the opposite of what they grow from, right? So. I didn't really talk about it to anyone over the years. And then about a month ago, and it's crazy how fresh this is, okay? Because it's been 16 years. I left my parents at 16 years old. I'm now 32 years old. Never talked about any of my background to anyone. And my wife she was watching Netflix, and she started watching this new show. Not a new show. It's a show that's been going on for 10 years. But I never listened to it because I was never interested into it. And it's called Alone. So she was watching it on Netflix, and then these people, they go in the wild, and they're given 10 items, and then they have to survive.
They're dropped off in the deep into the forest.
Yeah,
and it's good luck.
Exactly.
As long as you can survive.
And we looked at one with the first episode the other day, and you're right. There's some very dumb people in there.
Well, I wouldn't say they're dumb people, but there's a difference between watching something on YouTube, trying it a couple of times, and then being in a sort of survival situation, having to do it.
Right.
It's like starting a fire, right? In my childhood, I don't know, 4,000, 5,000 fires. I don't know. I started multiple fires every day because we had 2 wood stoves. We were outside all the time. There were lots of fires going all the time. Mm-hmm. I learned how to start fires with different in different ways and whatnot. It was just sort of
to you at this point.
And I was watching that show, and then I was so frustrated. I was like, babe, I was like, these people, like this guy, and I would predict things, right? So we watched the entire season over the course of a week, and every show would like predict, okay, this guy's going to be out next. That's not going to work. I was like kind of like frustrated the entire season. And then I was like, I got to write an application, and I sent in an application. And in the process of doing that, for the first time in 16 years, I sort of like reconnected with that part of myself. So
of your life.
It's been sort of this crazy
That's
thing.
wild, I know.
Yeah, it's very crazy because I did not go there. And then I went there with you guys the other day, and I talked about it for like, 2 hours? I couldn't shut up. I was I was just like, this is, and I was like, holy shit, I've been holding this back, right? My entire life, really, because it was like from that young age where it was private, and also, not only was I different, but also my parents would sort of like tell me like, don't share too much of what we do here, because we don't. I come from Fort Collonges is a very, very rough town. So Fort Collonges, there's a lot of rough people in the town that we were living close to, and some people, lots of hunters, people that are hunters, poachers. There were lots of weed grow-ops on government land around the area. So it's a very rough place, and my parents didn't want people knowing too much, because you want to stay private, right? You really want to stay private.
Do you think it's because you're so far away that people think that maybe the laws don't I think not always apply to them?
I think it was like that back in the day. It was like that. So Fort Collonges was originally Fort Collonges was a trading post. So when Canada was sort of formed, and trappers and whatnot, they would sort of like meet there and trade. So lots of people would leave from Fort Collonges, sort of the last trading post, because people would travel on the rivers, right? And there's a Collonges River that comes down, and it goes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometers north. And then, so that people would travel on the river, go and do portage in all the lakes. Like, it's full of lakes and rivers.
Portage is the...
So you go from one lake to another, essentially. And every time you cross a lake, you're gaining a lot of elevation. So what you do, essentially, is you start canoeing on a Beaver Dam.
Oh, okay.
And then I was a kid, I would canoe up Beaver Dam. I would cross maybe 10, 15, 20 beaver dams with the canoe, with my brothers, by myself. But it was like sort of our backyard, you could just leave.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And sort of you go up a beaver dam, and every time you go up another beaver dam, you gain elevation.
Then you downstream,
right?
And then you go further.
Well, yeah, if you can reach some lakes, sometimes some lakes they'll be connected to another lake upstream, right? Connected with a little stream in between, and then you can go up, many lakes, and then sometimes you'll meet rivers from larger pools of water. And if you know your maps, sometimes you can cut across the wood and then meet another river. It's very that's what people used to do hundreds of years ago, right? And that's Fort Collonges. It was a trading post for people doing that back in the days, and trading furs and leaving and whatnot. So, and after that, Fort Collonges, you want to hear more? After that, Fort Collonges, so along the Collonges River that goes north, there were these massive pine, and they would cut them. So the lumber industry started booming. These rich families came from Europe, and there's actually a Bryson House still to this day in Fort Collonges, being the estate of this rich dude, who George Bryson, who basically started cutting down lumber.
George Bryson?
George Bryson, yeah. So he started cutting down lumber upstream, maybe 100 kilometers north, and then they started traveling the logs on the Collonges River. Yeah. And then downstream into the Ottawa River,
it's a crazy,
and then eventually downstream into the Fleuve Saint Laurent, and then they actually shipped a shit ton of wood in Europe for the King of England.
Really?
Yeah, they supplied most of the wood and the lumber. So Fort Collonges became a lumberjack town. And some of my friends in high school, their grandfathers and families before that were either hunters, trappers, or a lot of people in the wood industry. So they would basically travel some logs down the river, and then you had these, I don't know how they call them, but they would run on the logs to make sure they don't get jammed. It was a very, very dangerous,
job,
super dangerous, but it paid very well. It was the equivalent back then. You would do that, and it was the equivalent of making about 150 to 200K a year in this day's exchange rate. It was like the guys that were sort of the leaders, you know, of the groups.
No, it was very good. It was super risky because it's super slippery. You're traveling on the kind of this barge of moving log down the river, and then you're walking on them, you know, with a pole, because your job is to make sure that nothing gets stuck in the river, right? So you stay on the trees all the way down. Super dangerous because people would go underneath, and then they would get stuck underneath the log because the fucking tree is super long, so they would drown.
Sometimes they would have a jam and the river full of logs up like 30, 40, 50, 100 kilometers long of like, no, maybe not 100 kilometers long, but they had millions of tons of logs that were jammed. So you had these guys that their job was to unjam the front logs so that they can, you know, go downstream. It was done also in the spring. They would cut down in the winter. And then that was done in the spring because you had a bigger stream in the spring.
Imagine the force of like, as soon as it gets unlocked, like,
exactly.
Everything goes. So you gotta be fucking careful.
Total destruction. Yeah.
Hey, imagine those guys, how crazy they were.
Is it fast? The water is fast moving there?
It's not necessarily that it's fast moving, but it's when you have all these millions of logs or hundreds of thousands of logs or whatever the number is that is stuck. There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And when it unjams, it's very dangerous. So it was a very, very dangerous job.
It's probably not millions, probably a few thousand or a few hundred, but still, like
the numbers. If you looked up the numbers, I don't remember
but
what they are.
It was a big operation.
It's on the internet. Dale was, I'm not good with. I don't have a good memory,
that?
but Dale was looking at it the other day, and even I didn't know that much. She was looking it up, and she was telling me about the whole history. I didn't even know that much, and it was big. It was big. So all that to say, that's where we were from. So it was kind of like, staying quiet. You have all sorts of different people, and also you still have neighbors, and there was a lot of like weed being grown on commercial, on properties that were owned by the government. So you had people that were involved in the areas, right, that you didn't really want people knowing, especially when you're sort of like out in the woods. You want to keep it quiet, right? So at school, I would not talk about, us growing our own food, us, even hunting. You come from a small town where everybody hunts, so everyone talks about it, but it was like sort of like you don't really. It was
still different than what you were doing.
It was still different than what we were doing, exactly. So you couldn't
even hunting, you couldn't relate to the other kids.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of like people would go and hunt. For us, it was part of the lifestyle, right? It was done with like a respect towards nature, right? So it was sort of like nature's providing. It wasn't this thing where you're like, oh, we're gonna go kill some animals, which is what a lot of hunters do, right? It's sort of this sport where it's like, you're trying to kill something. It's fair. If you're not going to eat it, or, if it's just for the show,
if you're not going to eat it, that's not good.
Exactly.
You need to eat it.
Absolutely. So hunting, fishing was also a big part of it. That was something I loved to do. I still love fishing to this day. So I would always go out as a kid, fish, sometimes on my own.
Because you said the other day, you said that's the first thing you would do, right? If you were...
if I was selected on the loan,
the show, whatever, if you had to survive, you would go fishing and get a bunch of fish.
Yeah, well, if you're somewhere that's actually remote, you go in the lakes around like, big cities, and there are so many people fishing and sort of, building cottages and out there, right? That fishing is not the same anymore in most lakes, anyways, in Canada. Unless you go up north, you have protected areas where you have limits, and you go out there and it's like you can fish, and there are so many fishes. So if you're actually in the wild, there's an abundance of like fish in the lakes. It's like crazy. Very, very easy to fish if you're actually in the wild.
It's probably a very healthy ecosystem.
It's a very balanced ecosystem. It's still the wild. It's the pure wild, right?
Yeah.
if you go around a big major city, it's like, I live in Ottawa now, in the middle of the city, and sometimes I like to go out hiking in Gatineau Park, which Gatineau Park is huge, right? You have all these hills, these mountains, and it's all protected. You're not allowed to hunt, but there's so many people. You go on a hike, you got like 7, 8, 9, more than that. You have like 10 big parking lots full of cars and people from the city going into nature, right? So you don't have the wildlife anymore. You don't see as many deers. You don't see as many birds. You don't see as much in general because it's not the same as being in the actual wild. And back from where I was from, we were so we were in the wild.
In the actual wild, you see quite a bit of animals.
You see quite a bit of animals, absolutely.
Surprisingly, you see quite a bit.
Yeah.
Is when we were making maple syrup on our property, we would see hundreds of deers.
Yeah.
Because we had cleared up part of the woods. So we were cutting them down to clear it up and to get the to get the maple tree connected to the system, right?
Yeah.
And then when we want to open a new section of the sugar shack, that's what you do. You need to clear everything, and then you need to record everything.
Yeah.
And then one time there was one that was sleeping because it was in the winter time, right?
Yeah.
And we were cutting the trees, we were lumberjacking or whatever it is. and when we came in the morning, my dad had the timberjack tractor, the huge one, and he backed on a deer. Like we killed fucking
by accident.
Yeah, by accident.
Racing,
It was sleeping underneath some branches.
That's when you know you have a deer problem. Yeah.
Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think the deer population, anyways, I don't know what the stats are, but I'm curious to see what's going to happen over the years, because I think, a lot of people hunt. A lot of people hunt deer, but I think that if you back up like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there were probably a lot more people hunting. You still have people hunting now, but anyways, in Canada, it's not the same anymore. People hunt in a more comfortable place as well, so you don't have as many people going deep into the woods. But then you still have a lot of cottages.
But also,
right?
down here, it's way more popular though. It's getting the backcountry hunting.
I guess it really depends on where you're at, right?
So because we hear it a lot.
Yeah.
We were with James yesterday, and I didn't even know he hunted, and I asked him because I wanted to start, and he was like, "Well, we could set that up very, very easily."
Yeah.
All of his friends hunt too.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Hunting has changed a lot over the years. You really we have so much more not necessarily technology, but somewhat, and also more knowledge and better products as well, right, to protect yourself, and equipment and better guns and better scopes and whatnot. You go back in time when scopes were just starting, and a lot of people were still going with the open sight, right? That's how I learned how to hunt, was the open sight. At first, we didn't have scopes, so you have the two. You gotta align the dots, and with a rifle, you're shooting far, but you still have to be very precise. Like you gotta hit, if you're shooting a larger animal, within some, you try to hit in the lungs or in the heart, anyways, right, in the chest, because otherwise you can hurt the animal and you can lose it. So there's a whole, and I think nowadays it's a bit more comfortable. A lot of people will set up things in areas where there's a lot of them, and also that I think there's a lot more. They control a lot more wildlife in Canada now, so I think it's the population, I think, is definitely growing.
Do you see it as a good thing or a bad thing that they control the wildlife? Because I don't know too much about that.
It's a tough one, right? It's a tough one. I think that everybody talks about balance all the time, and you think bears are like sort of this predator animal, or the apex predator. We're the actual apex predator on the planet, right? Because we have our hands and we have intelligence. But if you removed all the technology and all of the, you put everyone in the wild today, trust me that balance would come back, and I think that so I think it's a good thing that we're sort of controlling wildlife, because we've taken a lot on this planet, right? We have a very big footprint. So yeah, I definitely think it's good, but at the same time, people don't go out as much as far out, and again, I'm talking about Canada. In the States, I think it's so populated. In Canada, population I think has been declining, or not. It's not moving a lot. We're bringing in a lot of immigrants, but like people are dying faster than being born, right? So immigration is a big one, but at the same time, we're not really populated, and you can't really go further up north. So we have a lot more wildlife, right? In Canada, it's very interesting.
Yeah, a lot more land.
A lot more land.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's just this big chunk of land with like
that nobody lives on.
What's the population of Canada now?
40 million.
Yeah. So it's like I thought it was under 40 million, but it's not a lot.
It was 35 a couple of years ago, but it's just because right now we have about 800,000 something. No, it's 350 or 400,000 immigrants, but we also take in 600,000 to 700,000 new student to finance because the universities are subsidized, right?
Yeah.
And that's how they make most of the money, because the Canadian, they don't pay too much, and then on the international student they charge like 40 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand.
Yeah.
2021 it was about a little over 38 million.
Yeah, I think we hit 40 this year.
It's still a very small amount of population.
I know, it's not even it's not even twice as big as Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole fucking thing.
Yeah. Sorry, going back to the rafts that we were talking about earlier, the lumber.
Yeah.
So typically a raft would contain 2,000 to 2,400 timbers.
Holy shit.
Worth roughly about 12,000 in the middle of the century, and then that same raft by the turn of the century was worth $100,000.
Yeah.
There's like 16 pages of a ton of information on it.
Yeah,
really
it's
cool.
crazy.
I think that my grandfather's dad or something was one of those guys.
Oh yeah, it's this. When you go, you can go deep on that, and like, it's crazy because it's something that's the history is so rich, right? And it's never gonna happen again.
No.
Right? So it's kind of this thing that happened. I think it happened in Canada, and it happened in Europe as well. They were using the rivers to sort of like travel all the logs, and I think that's the only two places in the world where it happened. And but it was so big for a short period of time.
Yeah. It was the only way. It was the only way to move that many.
Yeah, I was looking at a map at like how far down you had to move all of the timber.
It's pretty long, right?
Yes. Yeah. Was your family involved in any trading? Because you said it was similar to a trading post, or no?
No. Actually, it's very interesting because my family doesn't come from that area. My grandfather
was loaded. I think you said no.
Well, my grandfather was in the insurance business, so he sold insurances. He had an insurance company. I think he had a team of people working with him, and he also he had properties and real estate, and he had a lot of real estate and tenants, and he was a landlord. So
nice.
A very, very interesting thing. It's like my dad left the city. He was in Gatineau, right across the river from Ottawa.
He wanted the complete opposite.
Yeah, he went the complete opposite, and then I went back to the complete opposite.
Yes.
So it's very, very interesting, process. And that was my dad, and my mom was from a small town, from a farming family. She was from a very small town. They were, I think, 14. And then when I was younger, I think they were still like 12, brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles.
Big family.
Yeah. Very big French-Canadian family. So
seems to be a theme with the French.
Well, yeah, my dad's family, they're 9.
Yeah.
Before we're 5 in mine. Yeah,
you have very you go back like one generation in Quebec, and from all these small towns, like the church would essentially push people to have kids.
Yeah, almost
right?
force the women to have kids.
Yeah, so essentially the priest would talk to the families and say continue. Yeah, because they were growing Christianity, right? So it's very, very interesting. You know,
No, this part of history in Quebec is a little bit weird.
it's a little bit weird. Yeah, there's like this
It's
a
a little
lot
bit
of weird
weird.
things that happen there. A lot of like scars on the generation before our generation, our parents, baby boomers, and very
So they
very
threw
interesting.
everything. They threw that to the drain. Now the religions is basically the government.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. Yeah, So my mom, they were a lot. They were farmers, and she was growing like from a young age large quantities of vegetables, and that was sort of her background. My dad, he went to live on that property, and he was just on his own, traveling in the wild and sort of living off the land without necessarily producing large quantities of food. And I think when he met my mom, they started growing gardens and bringing sort of a bit of the farming aspect,
Right.
a little bit more anyways, because my dad had already started, but my mom had a large background in that. And then, when I was a child, we were growing, like we had an acre of gardens. So it was like
An acre of gardens.
an acre of garden. Yeah,
Holy
it was-
shit!
Oh, wow.
Well,
That's a big garden.
That was a huge garden. We were three brothers, right? 3 boys plus my parents.
Yeah, because I know
and
Guillaume, and I never met your older brother.
my older brother Nick, so Nicolas. He's in Mexico now, which I think you should talk to him, because after he left my parents, he traveled all over the world, hitchhiking all over the world. So I don't know how many countries he hitchhiked in, but he has a lot of interesting stories. He speaks like 8 or 9 languages, most of them very fluently as well, and some of them at an expert level. Like his Spanish is just like absolutely incredible. It's like he's been in Mexico his entire life. I think he's still spent like 6 or 7 years in Mexico, so it's a lot. But he has a gift for languages. So apparently more you learn once you get past like 5 or 6. There's a lot of things that are working together.
Similarities and
And then he's worked a lot over the years at developing his accent, which is another part of language. You may speak the language perfectly, but if your accent is off, people may not understand you where you are.
Yeah.
So he's very good with like sort of changing his accent in Mexico. He lives in Mexico, and he can change the accent depending on the region he's in. It's very interesting. It's like he's an expert at languages. He would be so interesting to have on the podcast.
Yeah.
But that's Nick, and then Guillaume. Guillaume, who's in Ottawa as well.
we worked together. Guillaume, this is one of the funniest story. Remember when I locked myself out from my apartment?
Yeah.
So I locked myself out. It was in the winter time, and I locked myself out of the apartment. And back then we had the painting business, so we had like ladders and shit like that, right? And I knew it was on the 3rd floor of my apartment buildings. And I knew that my patio door was unlocked because I never locked it because it was on the 3rd floor. So I called Guillaume. I was like, because he was living the closest, and I was like, "Hey, do you have a ladder I could borrow?" I locked myself out. So with no phone, no wallet. I had my phone, but no keys, no wallet, no nothing. So I walked to his house like 2-3 kilometers or something like that, and then he got we came back, and then I went up the ladder, and then it was unlocked.
That's how we did things back in the day. You gotta just do whatever it takes.
Yeah. I know Guillaume.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So three brothers. We ate a lot of food. We ate a lot. Like when we were growing, like in high school,
You said earlier that you had food for years. Maybe can I have the other Celsius?
I don't. It's not necessarily that you can necessarily eat only.
How did you conserve the food? How does that work?
So canning. Canning is a so you can can, and like I'm eating. I still eat my parents' cans because they're so good. They have very good recipes, and some of them you can keep them for 5-10 years. I'm eating stuff from, I think I'm eating stuff from 2012 right now. Like tomato sauces and stuff like that. It stays like at a certain point in time, the can can lose its its seal or whatever, and but as long as it's sealed, so there's like a negative pressure essentially, it'll be good forever. So really, it's like what happens.
It's gonna be good forever.
Not necessarily forever, but
as long as the seal doesn't
yeah.
unseal.
you know.
Can you give an example of like an exact type of food that you like? What is the process to make sure that it's
Sure.
good
Yeah.
for this
Yeah.
long?
Absolutely. So usually, the general process is that you use mason jars, right? So glass containers, and you
Yeah.
have these little lids that go on top. They just sit on top. They're flat, and the edge of it is like sort of in a rubber material. And you want to basically heat the whatever's inside the container. So it creates pressure,
Super
basically
hot.
super hot. And then you have these things that you sort of like, have the mason jars with the small lid and the one that you roll on top that holds it there. So you basically put that in a water container that's boiling, and as pressure sort of like builds up, these little bubbles of air will come out of the lid because you don't put it tight on it. And then when it cools down, it's sort of like it cools down and it retracts, right, in terms of pressure or whatever, and it seals up. And you hear them; they do like pop. It's like the container went like sealed up, and that's like when you buy like cans.
And you hear that pop noise, yeah.
Yeah, you hear. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it's the same concept, right? So you can can like
My grandmother was doing that too.
Yeah, and Dale knows how to do it. I've done some like salsas a couple of years ago with Dale, and it's a very fun process. But we did it, sort of as a system, as part of the system, right? You're producing food, you have to keep it. So you can like meat, we would can meat for sandwiches. It's the same, you can buy canned tuna, we would can fish, right? So you can can pretty much everything, and it stays good forever. Yeah, it's a conserving food, is sort of a skill that's been lost, and transforming from having veggies into the ground, having meat come in. So a lot of people, they'll grow a little garden. They'll eat a fresh veggie here and there, and they're like, "Oh, I'm growing some food." But that's one thing. But then to grow food and sort of, conserve the food for years and transform it in a way that can, we dried stuff as well. You can keep dried things for years. So there's a lot that can be done.
How did you dry the things? How did you dry that?
So we had a drying rack. So to dry, and you can buy, like now I have an electric dryer, which is interesting. So I can dry, like sometimes I'll grow some oregano or, some spices in my garden in the summer, and I'll dry them in my sort of electric dryer, which has a heating unit at the bottom. And then it's all these small little racks with that allows the sort of air to go up. And you just spread a few things on there, and it takes, 24 hours, whatever. We had a wood stove, a cooking wood stove, flat top, right? Okay. That's, usually very wide. You can use it to cook. You have an oven on it. So we had one of these old wood stoves. And we had a place above it that we could hang this dryer, sorry. And it was just this box that had different racks in it with this sort of mesh.
Okay.
And you just spread some whatever you want on it. You can dry onions. You can dry peas. You can dry all sorts of stuff. So you could dry, like, let's say, a mix of vegetables, right? And when it dries, it takes like no room at all. It dries and it becomes a small little thing. You can dry celery, carrots, all sorts of veggies, and then you put them in a mason jar. You don't boil them or anything. You just put them there so it stays like sealed, if you will. Take that out a year, 2 years, whatever later, you boil it in a soup, let's say, right? Or in whatever you want, in a spaghetti sauce or whatever you want. It takes a lot of water, right? But it comes back to almost
reabsorb the water.
It comes back to the same size.
No way.
Yeah, and you keep all of the vitamins. You're not cooking it until that point, so it's still the first time it's been cooked, right? Which is very crazy, right? So it's very, very different.
Wow.
What I learned as a kid. Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I know we waste a lot of food in the U.S., so this is something that...
Yeah, well, in Canada as well, right?
Yes.
I think just the way that we've been, I think that the way that the system works right now, most people, they eat their food and they don't really know where it comes from, right? They have no idea what the process to bring the food to the plate was. So, therefore, it's just an exchange of money for food, and whatever you don't eat, you don't care, and you waste. But there's no value brought in the food because you have an unlimited amount of food. Let me tell you, if food stopped coming in, it would be sort of this. You don't think about that, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. We have a lot of food production capability, but it takes a lot of food to feed
Unless we get
8 billion
attacked.
people, right?
Could happen.
Fair. But generally speaking, right, we're good. If something ever happened where people need to figure out, how to produce their own food, it would be very difficult. But I'm glad that I would be fine.
Yeah, that's why I want us to start hunting.
It's it's a very good, like, people don't think about it like that, but I think it's a very good skill to have. It's a very good
Just
thing.
in case.
Well, it's not just just in case. It's also for you to appreciate more what's in front of you when you actually have.
Oh yeah,
the
and
food.
also the meat is so much better.
Yep, all of the food is so
Like
much better.
like moose or deer
Yeah.
is so much better.
Yeah, wild game definitely. Even farmed animals that have been sort of raised naturally on a farm is also so much
Yeah.
better. I drank goat milk as a child. It was the best thing ever. I do sometimes buy goat milk at the grocery.
Unpastured gold milk.
Oh, the goat milk I was drinking was straight up goat milk. We
Raw.
filtered it with just a little, what do you call those little filters, just to pick up any dirt or anything in it,
Right.
But it didn't remove any
Straight from the
component.
titties.
Not necessarily like that, 'cause you want to keep, you got to keep it clean. Those they're almost rubbing on the ground, and they're sort of like, cleanliness is actually in the food production. It's actually sort of the first rule. It's like you keep it clean.
You don't want to get sick off the
Oh, yeah.
food that you're growing or whatever you're cultivating.
So how does that work? You clean it, and then
you clean it, and then before you start,
you have to squeeze and squeeze and go down, right?
So you have to squeeze between, right? Like
Yeah.
between your thumb and your palm.
And go down like
and
this.
then you basically sort of like, it's like you got to
Oh,
squeeze
you're
here with the
massaging.
tongue,
I've seen
you're
this in
massaging.
video. Yeah, I haven't done it yet, but I've seen it in video.
It's very so.
milk it, and
Yeah.
then there's white things that come out.
There's milk basically. You milk it, and it goes in the bucket or in the container, and then you filter that. And we actually made our own cheese. We made our
nice.
own yogurt.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you
yeah.
make cheese?
That was
you
like
remember?
I remember. So basically, you sort of boil the milk at a certain temperature. You add some. You had something in it. I forget what it is.
I'm guessing you were not assigned to making the cheese.
No, I wasn't assigned
Okay.
to making the cheese.
Yeah. But you
and then-
saw some of
Yeah,
how it was done.
exactly. It's
Okay.
basically you add like almost like a bacteria or something in it that
The
makes
yeast
it like
maybe,
exactly.
Like
It's
the
like
beer or
a
something like that.
Yeah, I forget what it is. It has a name. It comes in a little bottle. You got to keep it in the fridge, and then you put that in it and you boil at a certain temperature. Then after that, it starts like creating like chunks essentially in it,
Okay.
and the water separates from the milk, and then you put it in a sort of a strainer. So you have these like clots essentially that will prevent the actual sort of particles to get out, but the water can come out of it. And then we have this press, and you essentially press this like inside a container with a bunch of small holes wrapped into a clot. You would press down, and then the liquids would come out, and then you tie the press and you keep it, and eventually a couple hours later you press more, and you continue that process for a little while, sometimes like over the whole day.
Okay.
And then when you took it out, it was this chunk of cheese. It wasn't cheese like, it didn't look and feel like cheese like you have like mozzarella cheese or whatever like you have in the store. It was a little bit more brittle. It would still hold itself, but it wouldn't melt as well. But it was very good, very very good, very tasty. Different than the taste of what you would taste in cheese at the grocery
Didn't taste
store.
like a cheddar cheese or whatever. No.
No. It's hard to describe the taste, but it's very, very good.
I guess it depends how you make it, right?
Sure.
I don't know nothing about making cheese. That could be
Yeah.
No,
interesting.
I was reading
have,
about they use a bacteria to
Yeah, it's a
get lactic
bacteria.
acid
Yeah,
Yeah.
to help to get it to curd.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's like
something like
it starts like
Oh,
clots.
that's
starts
why.
creating,
That's why the le fromage en
the
crotte
curds,
is called
yeah.
the curds.
Yeah, the
Nice.
the poutine cheese curds.
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, those are like the
These are so good.
the leftovers,
Holy
right?
fuck.
Oh, they're good. I love
Oh,
them.
I can't
yeah.
have those at home. Oh, no.
Yeah, you don't have those in Florida, but
No.
yeah, it's something else. When you go to Canada, you gotta
No,
have
we-
a poutine.
You
It's,
made me try some when we were up there.
Oh, you went? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. It's
she went for
unbelievable.
Christmas last year.
Yeah. I love my poutine once in a while. It's
That's
like
good.
Yeah.
It's a little bit weird, but it's delicious.
Oh, it's delicious. Yeah, and then my wife argues with me, but I always put ketchup in my poutine.
Yeah.
And she's
All right. You need to pee. Okay. Let's stop here for a second. Nice, and we're back. Talking for a few hours and drinking it's hard sometimes because
I need to drink water when I talk like
Me
that.
too.
It's like
me too. But then you piss. You piss every time. I pissed 3 times in the other podcast that we did this morning.
yeah. Well, if you're going for like 2 hours and it's the same. You got to drink water and
especially when you
hydrated.
talk because
Yeah.
you have this your mouth gets super dry.
Yeah.
And then it sounds weird, and it feels weird too. Yeah, so it's nice. It's nice to. What were we talking about?
I don't know where we were.
Cheese.
Yeah,
The cheese.
cheese.
We
Oh
were
yeah,
fucking
making
cheese.
cheese.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to hear more about the hunting.
About the hunting, yeah.
The hunting.
Like
You-
specifically things that happen out in the...
You know what? This is the
Oh, yeah,
crazy.
'cause
This
you
is
have
a
stories about
no,
that.
but this is the crazy part, right? And this is absolutely like it's so weird because I hunted so much small game, never killed my own deer.
Huh.
Yeah, I was there all of the time. I've seen a lot of them being shot. I participated in gutting all of them. Removing the skin and sort of like butchering the
I did that too with my uncle when
Yeah.
we did when we went in 2019. It was the first time I went hunting, and with my uncle and my dad,
Yeah.
and we went for a moose hunt.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that's
on my uncle's property, and it was amazing. We spent like a week over there, and we killed on the 4th day, I think.
yeah.
I missed 4 times.
It's very easy.
The
to
gun
miss,
was crooked.
Yeah,
The-
you gotta you gotta really know your weapons. So it's very interesting. I killed when I was a kid. I hunted so much small game. So at first I learned how to trap before I learned how to hunt, and I would just put snares, and I started trapping very young, like 10 or 11 years old. I would go out, put some snares out. I would find the rabbits where they had some trails. Essentially, I would sort of create sort of a barrier to bring them to a smaller area, and then I would put a snare there.
The snare
And-
is a chenille, right?
The snare is like it's almost like a little metal wire,
Oh,
right?
okay.
That's flexible, so it's like and you basically just put one straight loop that loops into the end, and you tie that to a solid piece of wood, and when they go in, it just ties around their neck, and then they're basically it takes them out. So I started like trapping when I was young. I trapped.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Un collet.
Yeah, I could.
Okay.
Yeah.
Un collet. Okay, cool.
I
know that.
I trapped a beaver on the beaver dams. Essentially, you have those areas of water, and then you have the house,
Right.
which is usually like sort of a pile of wood and sort of dirt mixed together with all sorts of leftovers, and they sort of swim from underneath, right? So you could find the entrance. Basically, you put a hole in the ice. There's a way to find the entrance, and once you find the entrance, you can also put sort of a trap in there. We use those traps that sort of snapped back. So I learned how to trap from a very young age. I would also hunt partridge. Most of the time, I would hunt with a small
What's
rifle.
that?
Partridge, it's like
a big bird.
it's a small bird. Essentially, it's
The perdrix.
perdrix. It's there's another name for it.
I think
It's
A grouse. A grouse is that a grouse?
I don't know.
It's a perdrix in French, and I thought it was partridge, but we have them a lot.
Yeah. It's about this big, right?
Yeah, it's very small.
Yeah.
Very small, and they hang out together. Usually, there's a couple together.
Yeah. And then you walk by them. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
one.
That's
So
the
you
one.
walk by them, and then they shoot, and then you like pull.
So that's sort of that's a shotgun. It's a way of hunting them, which will spread sort of the the range of a bunch of little what do you call them, like
Sharp.
pellets or exactly.
Yeah.
So when they move, it's easier to shoot them. I would mostly hunt with a .22 rifle, which is a small caliber. My bolt action was my first gun.
Oh, you
that
would
I-
hunt them with that?
Yeah. So in the head, I had to be very precise. I had a very, very good shot. I remember. So I would practice a lot. My parents would let me do that because it was sort of this thing where, you know, we were in the wild, right?
Yeah.
So our activities, things that we did for fun as brothers, we were 3 brothers, were all in the wild. They were all in the forest. So shooting gun was one of them. We were shooting. We all had a bow, some arrows. We all had a slingshot.
Did you make your bow?
I made a bow once. It didn't work out so well, but it worked, right? There are certain ways of making a bow that works. It doesn't do the best bow, but you can do it. You can make a bow with very, very limited materials. So you can basically, there are some tribes that were Native Americans tribes that certain clans would use this technique to make a bow where they would just pick up a small sort of like tree that's growing off the ground. It wasn't perfect. As long as it was straight, it was okay. Then they would basically put the string on the one side. So you had sort of the first curve, you know, first large curved piece. Then they would use this other curved piece that was a bit shorter, but it was curved the other way around.
Right.
And they would put a string between the top two, and then the string here that you would pull on it. So even if your piece of wood wasn't super solid, because you had pressure between opposing, yeah, exactly. So it's always like you pull on the first, it would pull on the second one, and it gave you more power, more pressure, essentially. So I've experimented with that, you know, as a kid, but you know, we had very good bows, so you know, it's sort of this thing where you played with everything. We just played in the wild, doing crazy things. You know, I would throw knives. I had a collection of throwing knives. I had nunchucks, which is crazy because I did martial arts. So my parents put me in jiu-jitsu. I started doing. I got my blue belt in jiu-jitsu.
Cool.
I think I was like 13 or 14 when I got my blue belt. I didn't go above that.
Do you do this anymore? Or
I
not right
don't.
now?
I haven't done jiu-jitsu since I was 16 years old. I stopped when I left my parents doing all forms of martial art. I did jiu-jitsu from the age of 6. I stopped doing it at 14, but then I started. I joined this other academy that was more. That was when UFC was starting, and there was sort of this mixed martial art academy that opened up in the region. It was a bit more rough, and it was sort of a fighting. Jiu-jitsu is like the art of defending yourself. So you're not necessarily like, you know,
You're not throwing jabs.
You're not
right?
throwing jabs. But then I went through this other school, and I learned a little bit more on being in the ring and fighting. It's, you know, a lot more action. And I remember the day before my graduation pictures in high school, and I have this picture I would have to show you. I have this huge black eye for my graduation pictures because the night and the crazy part is this was so funny because one of my best friends, his name was Jay, and he was very talented in martial arts, and we were also like, both of us would work out, so we were both like sort of these tall. You know, at 16, I was stronger. I've never been as strong as I was when I was 16. I would work out twice a day. We had a gym at high school. So I would lift weights, you know, every day, twice a day, and he would too. So I remember we had like the bench press competitions at school, and we were both the two top tiers, and we were doing martial arts together. And we had a match, like a very friendly match, and he knocked me out. It was sort of this thing. It's just like I thought he was gonna give me a kick, and he actually he was just bluffing, and he did this huge punch. He just knocked me the fuck out. I was cold. Yeah, cold. I was done. So, and then the next day I had a black eye, and you know, I did martial arts for most of my youth, but never got into an actual fight ever, because the first thing they teach you in jiu-jitsu is like, you know, it's the art of defending yourself, but you avoid every fight that you can.
Yeah, you're not starting.
Yeah.
When
so
you get choked, you get
and you know, you never know what can happen, right? So if you're able to avoid it, you know, I knew how to defend myself, and my parents were sort of like, they were pushing me to learn martial arts, and I loved it, so I continued. I when I was a kid, I would do like jiu-jitsu competitions and stuff. It was like a big part of my childhood. So the handling of weapons was then, you know, being on the farm and being a hunter as well, learning how to shoot, you know, and then, you know, learning how to use. So I learned how to use nunchucks.
Just picturing you with nunchucks, and it's just super funny.
Well, it was crazy. I was actually very, very, very talented
maybe he's
with.
very good at
Oh yeah, no,
not
I
so
should
funny.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. So nunchucks are actually illegal in Canada.
Really?
Yeah, you can not illegal. All forms of
Everything
nunchucks
is
are
illegal back there. Fuck's sake.
So it's not all forms of nunchucks, because nunchucks are super dangerous, dude. So what happens is the Bruce Lee movies came out, right?
Yeah.
That was in my
And
dad's time. My
everybody-
dad learned how to do nunchucks, and he taught me a lot on nunchucks. He was actually like my nunchuck sort of hero when I was a kid, and then I learned a lot of different techniques, and I started watching YouTube, and I learned a bunch on that, right? So, but nunchucks, when Bruce Lee came out, everybody started getting nunchucks in Canada, and a lot of people got killed in street fights because of nunchucks. Because when you swing a nunchuck, you have that last little snap. And even though you're going, you're doing, it's like if I hit you in the baseball bat, it's just that swing. But the nunchuck goes from basically behind you to in front of you.
Oh, yeah, it's a bit
in like a
more
split
force.
of a second. It's like you go, and at the very end, it's like the thing goes like crazy.
Yeah,
so
so
it's actually
you
very...
You catch a hit in your head, in the head or whatever.
It's very, very dangerous.
Huh.
So in Canada, we're allowed flexible material nunchucks. So they have to be sort of rubber material.
Oh, so you can have like hardwood or...
Yeah, you can actually like buy them on Amazon. They sell them and they'll ship to Canada, because you're not allowed to have a hardwood nunchuck, because that's definitely very dangerous. So
it's not so hard to make one if you want one.
no, exactly. But then again, it's like it's sort of this martial art form that's very nice to practice, but it's very sort of like it's almost artistic, right? When you
have
watch
videos of you practicing the nunchuck thing.
So Dan has a video of me in high school. So I loved to perform when I was a kid. I played music as well. So I played guitar, and I was in a band. When I got in high school, I joined a band, and we were friends, and we did a lot of shows. So in the high school, you'd always have these sort of annual sort of competition, talent performance competition. Right. And for many years, I would like sort of play guitar with my band. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically like, and then you have the different high schools from the province or whatever that compete against one another. So you compete, on a local level first, and then you go on a sort of like not provincial, but sort of regional level after. So I did a lot of those competitions playing guitar. And the last year of high school, I actually did a nunchuck show. And really? I did in high school, and then we went in the regional sort of show, and Dan was playing piano, and I was doing nunchucks. It was actually this crazy thing. I don't know why I did that. It was actually very dangerous, because I was so close, to the crowd. And Dan has that video. I've never seen it actually, but he claims that he has it. So we'll have to.
If you don't, send a copy. So
that's my best friend. Then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah, we have a lot of
I can't believe that we have one of our one of our best friend too, that can corroborate the whole fucking story, because he was there.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. So I did that, and also a lot of other weapons that I learned how to handle weapons the right way. It's you got to be very careful. Never had an accident. I was even handling guns. It's very. You got to be very careful. There's a way to do it properly, and that's just part of our childhood, really.
Yeah. What was the craziest thing that happened when you were in the wild?
Yeah, I wrote that down. I wanted to know about dangerous situations that you might have been in.
You know what? The crazy thing is that we were living off the land, but in harmony with the land, right? So with nature.
It was just normal.
It was just normal.
Yeah.
Right. I think in 92 or 93. No, later than that. What year was the ice storm? There was this massive 98. Okay, way later. And I was like 92. I was born in 91, so I wouldn't have remembered. In 98, I remember I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
We had this crazy ice storm. Yeah. Right. It was like a disaster in the entire province.
My father lost half of his trees, of his maple, because of that. Yeah.
Power cut everywhere for weeks. For weeks, and like
thick snow.
Thick snow. Like there was this thick of ice on trees, like even thicker than that on trees.
Massive power lines were coming down. Yeah. Like it was this disaster. It's like wild. You read about it in the. You can find so many news articles about it. It was like
one of the biggest natural disasters in Quebec.
Yeah, exactly. So the crazy part is that, people ask me, like, was there something that was dangerous?
For you, it didn't change anything, no?
It didn't change anything for us. We were putting our ice skates on, right? And because they couldn't open up the road, we were without being able to get out of the property because the road wasn't open. It was iced up. The whole region was iced up. So we were the last ones to get the service, right? So I remember going and skating on the road and having so much fun because it was just a normal day in the life of. We didn't have to do anything, right? Yeah. You're just there,
you didn't need the power. You don't need the power. Didn't change anything for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Wild.
So it's crazy. You stored the firewood for the winter, so you're good. You're heating with wood. We still had at the time no water, no running water, so you still had to go and get the water from the
creek,
stream.
And the river.
Yeah, exactly. But otherwise, it was. Nothing really happened.
What did you conserve water in?
This massive barrel. So it was like, it was this massive barrel on the second floor of the house. So that way there was pressure, right? And then there was actually a plumbing system. When I don't remember that much, but when I was very young, we didn't have the barrel on the second floor and that plumbing system in the house. We just had one barrel. Water would come in. It was sanitized and whatnot. You can wash it with bleach, the same way that they wash wells in Canada. You can bleach the well and then you run water through it. And the water was conserved in that, and then it was filtered. So we had a filter for our drinking water. And when I was very young,
did you have to boil it or no?
No, we didn't have to. No, never.
See?
It was very fresh water.
See?
Very, very fresh water.
Yeah,
there are some, in Wakefield, about a 30-minute drive from Ottawa. I go there sometime, and there is this running stream on the side of the road, and they have installed
the best water.
They installed these pipes. It literally just picks up the water from the stream.
Yeah.
And it's considered potable water, and everybody stops there on the side of the road to get fresh water.
There's
it's
a place,
the best tasting water.
There's a place like that near my dad's house too, at like 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
In what's the name? I think Dorley or something like that. Whatever.
It's crazy. You don't see that a lot, but there are these places, and this water. Because what happens is it comes. We have this chain of mountains in Canada. It's called the Bouclier Canadien. I forget what it is in English.
Yeah, whatever, like a Canadian Shield.
Canadian Shield. That's exactly it, actually. It's a Canadian Shield. So you have the Ottawa Valley, which essentially, farmland in the valley. Fort Coulonge, where I was from, is actually in the valley, but right before you go up the hills. And then my parents, you went up the Canadian Shield. It's actually a big chain of mountain. You have most of the ski hills on that chain of mountain and a lot of stuff, right? It's really like,
Why is it called the Canadian Shield?
I'm not sure. Because it goes, it's very, very long, and it's basically farmland type, valley type, and then all of a sudden for like hundreds of kilometers, mountains. It's like this sort of like mountain range that sort of separates in a straight line.
And on the other side of it, it just continues. Like it's just...
Pole.
It just continues, and then you're basically in the very hilly terrain all the way to the North Pole. So we live, my parents live essentially. You literally, the highway would go, and then you'd see this big hill, and then you have this little dirt road that went up, and it was a 30-minute drive up the road. You were gaining a lot of elevation.
So your parents lived up that
exactly
hill.
And that's why the water is very fresh, right? It's because it's coming down. So same thing with Wakefield near Ottawa. It's the same Canadian Shield. So essentially it's the same water, right? It's all coming from up north, from lakes that are higher up, and they sort of go downstream. And then a lot of it goes through the mountain, like underground. There's a lot of underground water. And then
it's a beautiful place. It's absolutely. Even Wakefield is super nice. Our friend Kyle developed properties over there.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of construction projects over there too. And it's super nice in the mountains, but it's kind of the last place where it's developed. Wakefield.
Exactly.
The highway didn't even go that far a couple of years ago, and now it goes up to Wakefield, and then further. I don't think there's anything.
No, it keeps going. What happened is, like, even where my parents are located, it became sort of cottage country, right?
Okay.
As a lot of people from Ottawa even go up to Fort Coulonge, that small village. It's an hour and a half drive. If you have a cottage within an hour and a half drive,
It's not that far. It's like Tremblant, Montreal. It's very, very manageable.
It's very manageable, and also
an hour and a half,
because
2 hours.
Yeah, and because you have the Ottawa Valley and then the Canadian Shield, where all the lakes and the rivers are like past that point. Then areas like my parents are being developed.
So it's growing a lot now.
It's growing a lot now. Yeah, so it's not as far out.
Because
right?
2 hours about the cutoff for a very easy to do. A cottage in this area, because a lot of people in Montreal too, there's 2 hours up, 2 hours down. That's about where you're gonna have the frame for the cottage for the very wealthy. You're gonna be because you got to think about it. You're gonna leave. Let's say you leave you finish work around 5-6 on Friday night or 4 or whatever. Then it's manageable getting there not too late. On Friday night, you spend the weekend over there, and then you can come back Sunday afternoon, and then you can work in the city during the week. So 2 hours is about the cutoff for a nice location.
Totally.
But longer than that, you lose a lot of value.
Yeah, definitely. Like when I was a kid, I remember there were a few cottages in the area. So we had our first neighbors. Well, we called them the neighbors, but it was essentially a cottage. And they were 1.5 mile away from us on a lake, because we weren't on a lake. It was the first one, the first cottage.
Was it?
Yeah. So the power lines didn't go all the way, right? They still don't have power lines today, so no electricity. They have solar panels now, but nowadays it's developed so much that because what happens? They live up this road, and the road keeps going pretty far, and if you go up and up and up, and they've developed a lot, built a lot of cottages. So when we were kids, like there was barely any traffic. Sometimes there would be an entire day without a car going by. Right. Now when I go visit my parents, you'll have sometimes like 50, 100 vehicles going by on the road. It's still very quiet, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy, like 50 to 100 vehicles.
It makes so much more sense now that you said the noise in Mexico, because you lived in Mexico for a year.
So
you were very sensitive to all the noise because you grew up in such a quiet place.
Absolutely. Well,
that's why it's crazy that he built businesses and like something like that, like to the level, because he really literally started at nothing. He couldn't. That's why I'm so impressed with Dan, especially. Dan couldn't even email.
Yeah.
He almost quit. He almost quit being an entrepreneur over how to send a fucking email.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't set the CRM up.
Yeah.
And I showed him how to open a Gmail account or whatever that was in 2011 or something like that. And then we figured out I showed him. It's like very easy, Dan. I'm sure you can figure that out.
It's very crazy because, even with the people I went to high school with, including Dan, a lot of people that I know of, I don't necessarily talk to them anymore, or maybe I still see them on social media and whatnot. But a lot of people that grow up, further away, including yourself, Dan, and whatnot.
But for some reason, Dan is the one that impressed me the most, because I think he started very, very rough.
Yeah.
You were way more polished than him. When I knew
Dan was a true lumberjack.
Holy shit. Holy shit.
Dan was a true lumberjack.
And now he looks like one with the big beard, and he's going to need to shave, though.
But you know what? It's crazy because so much ambition, and he runs such a good, large,
everybody loves him,
profitable business.
He's amazing.
He is the painting, cabinetry, refacing and cabinetry painting business in the Ottawa region. He's the largest company at the moment. I don't even know how many employees he does. He has, but I know he runs in the $5 to $7 million of revenue a year. It's crazy.
Yeah,
and it's from being.
He's super profitable too.
Yeah, from being
super
from
profitable.
The woods.
Everything is organized. They systemize everything. So he's been growing very, very slow and very, very steadily over the last 5 years, and to process to be able to. Every operation in the business is processed.
Yeah.
Consistency.
Yeah.
Consistency. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been quite the journey. I have to say quite the journey. But there's so many stories. One of the good ones that I like to bring up, and a lot of people like to hear about it is just building shelters. That was I've always been good in construction. I worked leaving my parents, and I started in different businesses, but I did home renovations for many years. I have this thing. I understand how things are built. Very good at understanding how things are put together, and I had that from a very young age. So I started with my two brothers. We started building winter shelters and staying in very, very cold temperatures in the coldest months.
Yeah, because outside you
How
go
cold?
out in the winter, whatever the season, and you can survive.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, winter shelters, it's, again, it's sort of like you have to understand how it's built, but once you understand how it's built, it's very straightforward. And then for sure, if you're in a survival situation versus if for us, we got to practice it, but still, we were still comfortable, right? We didn't need to do it. We just did it because we wanted to have fun. So it's sort of this thing where, I've done it so many times as a kid, learning and having fun, right? And I think that's the best way to learn things. It's like, if you're having fun doing it, you're enjoying it. You'll learn, you'll experiment.
We need to rethink how we teach things.
Yeah.
And especially to boys. Especially because it's impossible to stay still for a few hours.
Yeah.
We're talking, we're having fun, but I'm fucking moving. I'm like, I'm staying loose. I can't stand sitting still.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the same. Yeah, got to do something. But again, I don't think that's everyone though. I think there's a lot of people that are very, very good. Like, I think it's a personality thing. I'm very similar to you in the fact that I have a million ideas and I like to create or to build things. But some people are not very good at creating and developing or building things, and they're very good at doing one thing very, very well. And for me, I always say, like, I have a hard time doing the same thing for, like, more than 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's like sort of my max, max amount of time. And even there, I like to do 2-minute tasks, 3-minute tasks. That's what I perform the most. I can do a million tasks in a day, but if you ask me to sit for like an hour and do something, like, that's hard. That's hard.
That's why I cannot do administration.
When I got my realtor license, that was the hardest thing I've done, in a long time.
Harder than building shelters.
Harder than building shelters. Yeah.
So the way I learned real estate was I followed this guy, Pat. He was selling about 100 homes a year in the team when I started to work, and that's how I learned, because I stayed super, super close to that guy, and because in the course or whatever, they teach you, but they don't teach you really how it works, right? They teach you how to fill the paperwork and the reason why it's kind of important, but they don't teach you exactly. There could be a better job in teaching you the reality of what it is to be an agent, what it is like, how do you get leads, how to and then not by people that are teaching, like by people that are actually doing the work and that people that are actually successful doing it. I think there's a lot of things that we need to rethink, especially when we teach like some trades or business or marketing or whatever. Like and at university, at college, when we had those professors that they were teaching business, but they were teachers. They were not. That's why I wanted to quit college when I was doing the painting, because I couldn't relate at all with everything that they were teaching in business school, because that's where I was. And then I finally thank God I finished it. I just finished. I just were able to do social studies with economics minor. But yeah, it was so far up in the sky in university compared to the actually trying to organize and managing and finding and figuring it out.
Yeah. Well, I think that they teach you, just more of a way of doing things.
Or they teach you what I felt like. I felt like it was just how to be an employee in a big corporation. I feel like.
Yeah, and that's most of what the world needs, and that's the reality, right? The world also need entrepreneurs, but I believe in balance. I think that natural balance, like being an entrepreneur, is so hard because if you fuck it up, it's 100% on you, right? So that's the harsh reality of entrepreneurship, and I think that natural balance in the entrepreneurship world is very important. If you're not going to be a hustler, if you're not going to do things the right way, if you're not going to aim to be the top in your field, or if you're not going to strive towards the best, you're going to automatically get out. You're not going to be able to.
But you need to be a hustler up
survive.
until up to a certain point. Then you cannot anymore, because then you're never going to be able to grow, and then you're never going to be able to pass this level of doing everything yourself and whatever. So
I think that.
So then if you continue to hustle, past a certain point, then you're just going to run your business into the ground.
Exactly.
So delegating the work is what you're saying.
Yeah. You can only grow at a certain speed as well, right? There's a certain. That's the reality of entrepreneurship is crazy, because you're at a certain level, and if you want to grow to another level, you have to take a certain step, and you have to change everything. So you're always learning and you're always growing. But the interesting part is, if you surround yourself and you get good coaches and mentors and whatnot, then things will really work out, right? And just like fitness or anything else. Like first thing we did, like when we started our team in Ottawa this year, Dale and I, in January, is we hired a coaching company for it, and we have our biweekly meeting, and we're just following the system. Someone's figured it out. So
can you explain that a little bit more, because everyone's hearing this for the first time, exactly what you do, going from the woods to what you do now?
Yeah, so now I'm a real estate agent.
Okay.
It's been very interesting. My trajectory over the year was, I sort of went from being in the woods, and then I left and I started in the sales and marketing business, and I had different sort of jobs in different industries. And
yeah, because the first thing you did was network marketing.
Network marketing.
How did that go?
Well, that was sort of a very interesting business.
You were like 18 or whatever.
I was 18 years old. Yeah. So, and I had a job. I got a sales job.
That was a year. Okay. So how?
Okay. So yeah.
The transition.
Yeah.
To business.
So the transition to business. So this crazy thing happened where I was sort of like, I went to regular school. I went to high school.
Yeah.
I graduated at the age of 15 from high school. So
that's super early.
Super early. I started school I think because my birthday is in August. I started school sort of like, I could have started school the following year, but I started school at the fastest I could start. So I'm happy my parents put me in preschool right away, and I was sort of the youngest in my class. I think there was one more younger than I was, and graduated at 15, all I had known was sort of like, the area where I lived, and sort of the woods. So I wanted to explore the world. It's like I wanted to get out there, and I wanted to see things. My older brother, he started traveling. He went to college for a year, and then he started traveling. So by the time I was done high school, he was out west, close to Vancouver. And sort of he inspired me to go and explore. So I hitchhiked. I left my parents with a backpack and hitchhiked across the country. I met up with my brother in British Columbia in the Okanagan Valley.
So nice over there.
Very, very nice. It's such a beautiful part of the country. Oh. It's like, everyone, British Columbia, the province of British Columbia is like the most scenic thing that you'll see.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Kelowna is it's one of the best places on earth.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable. And the crazy thing about British Columbia is that you have the Okanagan Valley, which is essentially it's like the tail end of the desert going up, up the west coast.
It's the similar to Napa Valley in California. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. And it's this big valley, and there's a lot of fruits growing there.
And then an hour east, it's the Rockies. And then when you have Banff, it's the mountain. Lake Louise is for me, this is the prettiest scenery I've seen in my life by far. By far.
It's beautiful.
There's so few places that lives up to the hype, and that are super hyped. Yeah. And Lake Louise is probably one of the top that lives up to the hype. It's absolutely amazing.
It's beautiful. Yeah. So I was there. I was actually there. I lived in Banff, not too far from Lake Louise for a little while. But I traveled around. Like I left my parents. I hitchhiked. I got a job as I started washing dishes actually in a restaurant. I was still 15 years old. and I pitched my tent in the woods because a lot of people were working in the region and picking fruits, so picking cherries and whatnot. And it's sort of a culture. People go there and they pitch tents and they camp.
It's actually, for a kid, you make a lot of money doing that. You can make $30 an hour, $40 an hour, or something like that.
A lot of people traveling from all over.
If you work hard, you can make a lot of money.
You can make a lot of money. It's this culture. It's like kids traveling from all over and meeting there and camping and picking cherries.
Yeah.
It's
a thing. Yeah,
it's still a thing today.
Oh yeah.
There's
a lot of kids that finish high school. They go there for a year or so.
Or for the summers.
Yeah, or for the summers.
It's a summer thing. I met tons of people there. Tons of young people from Quebec or from all over the country and from the States. It's this crazy thing. So camping was part of the culture too. But I didn't camp with other people. I sort of found my own sort of little piece of forest. It wasn't legal. I stayed in this. There was a little patch of wood off of I think it was a peach farm.
Okay.
And I camped there for like 2 months, and I was walking into town and sort of doing my job as a washing dishes, and then walking back. And eventually, one morning I woke up and there's the farmer there, and he's like, "You got to pack up." So I had kept things very clean. I had disrupted. He didn't hear me for like 3 months. So he's just bumped into me and
by accident, because he was walking the farm or whatever.
Exactly. Huh. And then I just packed up, and he actually gave me a ride, and it was very nice, very very nice man. And then I actually bought a van, sort of a camper van type, with a bed in the back, and
you can get by with a minivan for a while.
Yeah, so what happened is I was in the Okanagan Valley, and I sort of bought this van. I stayed in the Okanagan Valley with the van. I was still washing dishes, and I was actually parked at the restaurant. I asked the owner if I could park there, and they're like, "Yeah, no problem." So I was living there, I was working there, and there was the very nice lakes. I would walk to the beach and hang out. It was a very, very cool experience, at that age. And then in the fall, I drove the van over to Alberta, and I went to Banff, which is essentially sort of, you have all of the ski resorts, and I had done a lot of skiing when I was a kid, so I got myself a snowboard. I started snowboarding there, and I stayed there into the winter. And then I did a bit of back and forth like that for a year and a half. And then when I came back, Dan had met me in British Columbia, and he traveled with me for the last 6 months of that period of a year and a half. And when we came back, we met with his uncle. And it was kind of a wake-up call. We were, at the time I was 17. It was just before my 18th birthday. And he was like, guys, like, he owned an ATM machine. He had, I don't know how many ATM machines all over the region of Ottawa. And we just visited him, and he sort of inspired me.
Yeah, because surprisingly enough, you can make a lot of money with a bunch of ATMs.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
$2-3 a transaction.
It goes fast.
It goes fast.
Yeah, he had a lot. He had in the hundreds of ATM machines. So he sort of inspired me to get started in the sales and sort of business thing. And then it's just something that's set over the years. And I've always been sort of like sales and marketing, in different industries, home renovations for a very long time. And my wife's been a realtor for 8 years. We've been together for 8.5 years. So she started real estate not too long after.
I was there when you met her.
It was a while back. And then she started real estate not too long after we were together. And then I started real estate 6 years later.
Yeah, we didn't like her at first because he was always with her. He didn't talk to us for like a year.
Yeah, I was in love. What can I say? I really found, I'm really happy. I found,
she's amazing.
Partner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we've developed a lot over the years, and we've worked a lot on our relationship, and now we work together. So we just do everything together, right? It's sort of this a very nice relationship that works really well. It definitely takes a long time to sort of like tweak and figure out who does what, but we have a very good system in place, and sort of, we're having a lot of fun, which is essentially what matters the most, right?
Yeah.
So when you have fun and you just do, you're not stressed, and things are going well, you can have a nice, enjoyable life. And when you have a life partner to do it with, well, then it's just so much better, right?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, so that's sort of been the process, in general, to get me into real estate. My wife is is the one that inspired me to join.
Because you flipped a couple of homes too, right? In the last few years, and so you had the construction company. You were my coach when we did the painting business, and then you moved to the construction company. Then you moved to Dan's company.
Exactly.
In selling a lot of work for him, and then you finished. You went to Mexico during COVID. And you came back because you were doing real estate in Mexico as well, but you came back to Ottawa.
Yeah, so the transition was sort of like I got into sales. My first sales job, actually, I was selling produce. So I got this first sales job right after I started MLM. MLM didn't really make money at first, the multi-level marketing.
But you built a big team, no?
But it took a while, right? So
right.
at first I got this sales job. And the company, what they offered is they offered very high quality meat that would get delivered to your home about twice a year. So if you didn't have the freezer, I would have to sell you the freezer. And then they also delivered all the produce that was sort of canned, right, and or dried that you could keep for a very long time. So they would do like 2 or 3 deliveries a year.
And it was 3,000 for a year. Like it was kind of still.
Yeah, depending on the size of the family, it could be it could be pretty significant. So that was actually my first sales job. That was very, very good sales training because every day we had a meeting in the morning. They would sort of pump us up, and they would talk about sort of like because the whole sale would take about 3 hours. So what you were doing, they had sort of a call center.
And you were doing that over the phone?
No. So essentially, they had a call center. The company had a call center, and they would call people. And I don't know what their script was, but they would tell people like, "You're gonna save money on your ketchup. Like your $5 ketchup bottle is gonna be like $3." And they would give sort of a bunch of examples of a bunch of products that people could save on. And if you want, we'll send one of our guys over, and they can just give you an example of how much it would cost for you. Very quick, simple thing. But really, when you went there, you were basically doing your presentation, explaining why it was costing less, right, and the process. And then you were saying, okay, let's put an order together, right, just to give you an idea. Let's calculate what you would eat, right? And then you would sort of go through this whole order sheet and sort of like, and when they started that process, that took like an hour to an hour and a half to put that together. But it was like a funnel. It was like a funnel, right?
They're so involved in the process that...
And then at the end, you had the number, and then they could put a deposit on it right now and secure it. And, if they didn't have the freezer, you had to sell them a freezer. So that's how I learned how to sell. And then I did that, and I did multi-level marketing. And then eventually we started, still very young. It was just a year and a half later, I started in the student painting business. And, I started as a franchisee.
Before we go in there, I need to pee again, folks. And we're back. Yeah, we're talking about the painting, how you got involved in the scholars, the student painting business.
Yeah, the student painting business was like a business school, right? Because they would just basically teach you all the basics of like, branding, lead generation. They would give you a little territory within the city. So I had a little territory in the city of Ottawa, and that's where I was allowed to market. And same for you when we did this.
Yeah.
And then you would hire people to knock on doors, get some potential homeowners that would want some painting done, and then sell them the painting job.
And you would go sit down with them, and then evaluate the job, and then try to. And
then when summer came around, you would hire some painters, some university painters, some students that needed sort of student jobs, and get them to do the work. It was a very good business school. Very, very good.
It was cool for students too. It was cool for students too. We were paying $15, $17, $20 an hour.
Yeah.
For kids, there was good jobs. Yeah. Like if for one of my painter made, he was very good, but we fucked up the how to pay him. So we paid him like way too much in advance or whatever, because we were paying them as at the job, right? So they had this amount of hour budgeted in the work. But then, so let's say we like to paint a room like this. We would like. Okay, we can calculate.
It's like piecework, essentially, right?
Exactly. So we were so it takes 2 hours to paint everything here. If he does it in one, well, then he's still paid for 2 hours, right? So it doesn't matter how much time it took. It just mattered that the job was done.
Yeah. It was very interesting learning all these things. and we were young at the time, right? Around 20 years old, and yeah, it was sort of a foundation for everything I did afterwards, the student painting. I transitioned to home renovations because it just still in the renovation industry, so I was an easy.
Yeah, we have a lot of friends that
skills.
transferred
Exactly
to home renovation.
Yeah,
I
Lots of
remember you
friends.
mentioned that.
Yeah, like Dan that we were talking about earlier, and
It makes sense that I sell homes, so
Yeah.
well, sold.
so selling
I
homes
sold
was
development.
like sort of this thing. I did home renovation, worked on my own, and then I worked with Dan in Northco as the marketing and sales director for a couple of years, and then moving into real estate with my wife, that was a realtor, was just this transition that made sense.
Because you flipped a few home in the meantime.
That's how we started, right? So Dale and I flipped a couple of properties, and while I was still working in the renovation business, and then after that, it just made sense for me to sort of focus on selling houses. You sell a renovation project or you sell a house. You'll make more money selling houses. So it was sort of a natural progression, but still in the same industry, which is very very interesting. And that's sort of a general idea. But going back to my childhood, I think I was brought up in a way, and then I think that's what pushed me towards becoming an entrepreneur, and probably the same for you as well. When you're in the wild, you can really be free. You can pretty much do anything, right? You just have fun.
Yeah.
And then when you move into like society and the way we do things in the current world, it's very structured, and being an employee is very difficult on someone like us, probably who were just used to being so free, right? If you live off,
If I don't know why I do this, I won't do it.
yeah, exactly.
You have to please explain why. Then if it makes sense, sure, we'll do it.
Yeah.
But if I can't see why, then no.
Exactly. Yeah. And also freedom, right? The freedom of building your own business, doing things your own way, not having too much structure. Like the freedom that you live in the wild, when you live off the land. My parents are totally free, right? You have nothing. You can just do whatever you want, right? There's no limits. Like, yeah, you're very limited in a sense, right? Because you're just out there. But you have no obligations, right? So you don't have to do this or have to do that. You're not running crazy to sort of like, make your place in the world. You're just living, right? It's a very peaceful type of lifestyle. And I think that building your own business can bring you sort of that same amount of sort of peace and freedom if you do it properly, and if you sort of like if you establish yourself in a way that allows you to be yourself, then you're totally free. You just do what you like and you have fun, and I think that's the nature of living. At the end of the day, we're only here for so long, right? So being free is so important, and I think being free in a sense that you do what you like to do, you surround yourself with people that you like, and you don't have to do things that you don't want to do. I think that's a big driver for me, probably for you as well, right?
Oh yeah,
it's like the world's your oysters, and you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah,
not whatever you want. You're still very limited. The freedom that you live, in nature. I don't think it's possible in this society. That level of freedom.
What do you mean?
The feeling that you get from it.
How so?
Because there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing.
You don't have rules or regulations.
There's no rule. Well, I mean, there are rules,
right?
but there's no one there. Judgment, ways to do things, politics, opinions, whatever it would be, religion, nothing. You're out in the woods. You're just totally free from any idea of how things need to be done. You're just out there. You can do things your own way. You don't have to listen to anything. You can be completely disconnected from the current world, which is a feeling that I felt, a little bit when I was a kid. I never felt it again.
Do you miss that feeling?
I think it's sort of one of my drivers in life. I've always, I'm always aiming to do more or to create more, but I think true freedom is what I'm aiming for, right?
Yeah.
It's trying to recreate that in my life, right? Same. Abundance and freedom, right? Abundance goes along with it as well, right? Abundance and freedom, I think, are two important things that if you can bring that into your life, you're going to have a very nice life. Yeah. That's
the point. You want to enjoy.
You want to enjoy it.
You want to enjoy the thing that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you guys go camping or anything like that now to reconnect? Or is this something maybe just now you're now considering?
Not even.
No.
Okay. Well, in a sense. So I have applied for that show alone.
Yeah.
And
Your application was 13 page, no?
Something like that. I sort of
Wait,
started writing.
Is it typically that long, or you just kept writing?
I just kept writing. I didn't submit the whole thing because because then you start going to these rabbit holes and
Yes.
then I think that it's sort of you want to keep the application straightforward. But I started writing things like it's crazy because I sort of suppressed that. I left my parents. I was 16 and I sort of turned my back on that way of living.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Completely.
Never talked about it.
Never
at all. Not even a little bit.
No, anyone in my life,
no idea.
even my wife, didn't know this much, right? Now we've talked a lot about it, but it's sort of this thing that I've uncovered literally just in the last 2 months. And I think, as a kid, I felt like I was different. I felt like I was unfair, which, it's normal. You're a kid, you're a teenager. So you sort of rebel yourself against it. And then I turned
it's actually something supernatural especially for men to rebel against everything their parents stands for, and then to leave, and then to come back when they're in the mid to late 20s, is to prevent. So we're wired that way to prevent incest.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's a very interesting. That's literally how it felt.
Yeah.
I've left those ideas. So you asked me if we like to go camping. Dale loves to go camping on a camping ground. Then you have your little campsite, and I absolutely hate it.
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely hate it because that's not camping.
Yeah, do you do anything like deep woods or backcountry? I guess.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I did it so much when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. It's sort of part of who I am. I slept in the middle of winter in my own shelters many times, and I learned. The first time it didn't work out. It was so cold in my shelter that my boots froze, and I wasn't able to open them up to put them on. So I got out of my sleeping bag, and I had to walk barefoot home because it was so cold in my shelter that my boots were frozen. I couldn't open them up because they were humid.
How far away were you?
I wasn't far.
Okay.
I really wasn't far, but I was probably 10 years old or something like that.
Like maybe a mile or something?
No. I was 300-400 meters away.
Oh, okay.
I was
just enough to be outside.
Just
in the
enough
dark.
to be outside. But, I was between 10 and 12 years old, right?
Wow.
So my parents would just let me experiment. And then, I built some legit winter shelters. We built our own wood stove, my brothers and I. Little wood stove. We installed a chimney in there.
How did you install the chimney?
Well, it was kind of you just got these whatever chimney pieces. It was a small, maybe 4-inch tube, right?
Old can, no? That you were saying the other day, for the stove or whatever, the old.
So the stove itself is just sort of this barrel, right? I don't know what steel barrel, whatever. It was a small barrel. You use it to people used to use it, whatever. And back in the days, we don't really use them anymore. It's so expensive to produce. But we just basically punched a hole in there, made a door, and then you make a hole for the chimney. Our dad helped us to build that. Our dad was very, very handy. He's still very handy. Built
and then
everything.
You were covering everything in mud, and then it would kind of solidify.
No, so it was just the stove in the middle of the shelter, basically, with the chimney that went outside, and then basically our shelter was just sort of we basically put a middle pole, branches all along. We put a tarp so that we have no water seeping through, and then you throw basically sort of fir trees branches on top of it, and you pile up
for insulation.
Well, so what happens is that they're very spacious, and the needles are all there, so it's kind of it covers everything.
Right.
But if you do a very thick amount, when it starts snowing, so I don't know if you ever experimented with snow where the snow is undisturbed, it's very loose, but as soon as you disturb it, it becomes very hard, right? Compact.
Yeah.
Essentially, right? So, and once it's hard, it doesn't go back. So you would basically shake those branches as the snow would fall on it to let everything seep into it, and then you just throw snow on it. So you'd shovel snow on top of that thing. So if you built it, we built one in the winter, you would basically dig out your area where you want to build your shelter. We put our tarp on the ground, then we'd put the branches, then put a tarp on top, then put all these fir branches on top of that. and then you just throw a load of snow on there, and you build this like shell basically.
Yeah.
Very comfortable. If you have if you have a way to have fire in your shelter, it can be very comfortable.
So cool.
It's very cool, yeah. So that was sort of my childhood, right? Experimenting with things like that, going fishing, like, out in the wild, on my own. I would just, my favorite thing as a kid when I was like 14, 15 years old, I had my gun, I had my sort of backpack pouch, and I had the canoe or walking, and I would just explore, leave for sometimes I would leave for 6-8 hours at a time. I would leave in the morning, come back at night.
Did you ever go for a couple of days, like out on your own?
Yeah, I went for a couple of days. Never so long, never super long. But we had these shelters, right? So we'd basically leave and then just sleep in the shelter.
And you would leave up.
What's that?
So you were building the shelter.
Yeah, you'd leave it up. Eventually, it fell apart, right? You usually wouldn't use it for more than one season. So many winters in a row, we had our winter shelters that we'd build in different areas of the forest, right? It was a lot of fun. We were always building stuff, like doing stuff, right?
Such a fun childhood.
Super fun. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Out in the wild and all the elements. And
Exactly.
Oh, cool.
It was very different. Yeah.
And then you suppressed everything.
And then I suppressed everything. I
So
suppressed absolutely everything.
You applied for this, obviously you guys recently watched the show and then you applied.
Yeah.
How long until you hear
You know what?
back? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Okay.
And I really hope that, I make it. I hope that I get to speak to someone. And if I have a shot to speak to someone, I think that my story can be interesting enough that, they would consider me. But
We'll send them the tape.
Yeah, it's still a very competitive. Show to get on. I think that they have
some pretty highly trained. I mean, from the episode we watched, their backgrounds were pretty significant.
There's some people that are legit. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's some people that maybe not that much, and then.
No. I think like his background, he could easily be. Do very well.
I think that if I got on the show, I would 100% win. I'm 100% confident in it, and. I'd be willing to bet on it.
Now this I want to watch.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. A lot of people that go on these survivalist show, they've gone to a lot of survivalist training weekends. Some of them, started doing survival stuff, in their 20s and their 30s as adults. They developed an interest.
You grew up.
Exactly. A lot of people developed an interest. Over time, they develop an interest in that field, and then they're passionate about it, and then they try stuff and they experiment with stuff. But don't tell me that most of these people have started thousands and thousands and thousands of fires, out in the wild. Like, it's like, as a kid, I remember I was 13 or 14 years old. I was trapping beaver. And I was one of these beaver dams, and I went through the ice.
Yeah, because you would have no problem getting food and building a shelter. So theoretically, you could stay out for forever, as long as it takes.
As long as it takes. So I went through the ice. There wasn't a lot of water, but I was completely soaking. It was frozen. And, it's one of those things like I started fire in an instant because I had done it so much. And this is where practice comes in, right? So it's second nature to me, and that's why I think I would win. I understand principles of doing certain things, and I've practiced them over and over again. Maybe it was for fun. Maybe I wasn't in a survival
environment. But now you understand how to prioritize what you need to do in order to set you up and kind of survive. Like what you said the other day when you told us you were frustrated.
You know what? It's one of those things that in the wild, there's a lot of things that you can do that will actually produce results, but you can't. There's a lot of things that you can do that's very stupid.
Like what?
Like being too crafty or too creative. At the end of the day, you're in the wild. You have to maintain things really simple. Back to basics and sort of like learn the basic things that will allow you to survive. A lot of people, think that in a survival state, in the wild, like a lot of people on that show alone, they go and they spend so much energy on building crazy shelters, and then they tap out because they
or in
they didn't
where
eat,
to build
right?
the shelters. From
Exactly.
what we saw,
Is that's the first thing you do is build shelter? Is that right?
No,
Or no?
I would
No.
go
Okay.
on no.
Well,
so
before we go there, let's because it was super interesting the way you were saying how you would survive on the show the other day, because
so I would value
they're allowed like a certain amount of item that you can bring with you,
No guns.
right?
no
no
guns.
guns,
No,
no
you're allowed
guns.
like a bow and arrow, a knife. A sleeping bag is an item, so you got to be very careful into what you choose, right?
Yeah. So you have 10.
You have 10 items. Like if you want, a gill net to fish, if you want string to do some stuff, tie things together, it's an item. A tarp is an item. So it's like one of those. It's very strict, and you know.
10 is not that much. It's not.
10 is not that much, and you're allowed to choose up to 2 items that are food related. So a pound of rice or whatever it is. I don't know what the amounts is, but
Would you choose any food?
I don't think I would choose any food. I would choose like the tools, right? And I don't know exactly what I would choose. It depends where you're going. You'd
The
have
tools to get the food.
tools to get the food,
Yeah.
but and this is where I think that my strength and my knowledge comes in on that show. It's second nature to me. I haven't done it in 16 years, but I understand the principles of food production and the
But
quantity.
I'm sure
of
you
food.
would prep if you would go on the show.
I would definitely
prep, right?
I
You
would
go
definitely
back to,
practice.
with your dad a couple of weeks and.
Oh,
kind of
I
do
would-
like a training camp. Or whatever.
Definitely, I would definitely practice. Just for things to come back. But I would definitely focus on food production. Producing food and transforming food in the wild, right, is number one priority. If you're stuck like that somewhere, or if you're dropped off in that show, I think that you have to produce large quantities of food and a variety of food as well, right? If you want to eat well,
Nutrients.
Right.
to have different types of nutrients and.
So what kind of
and,
food would you have? Would you want to have?
It depends where you're at, for sure. Fish and meat is definitely a big thing. But you have to, if you're able to, pick some mushrooms, berries, and things like that as well, would be a big thing on that show. But I definitely think that that should be the focus of anyone in a survival state. Establish your food supply.
Because you can
And-
sleep outside for a few days.
You can sleep outside for a few weeks, right? And the thing is, once you've figured out how to bring in food, then you're eating and you're sort of like getting that energy or those calories to start working on something like a shelter or whatever you want to build, right? But if you
Right,
start spending
because
calories like
Building the
calorie-
shelter and the whole
Oh,
thing, then you get with the this guy in the first episode. He's like he spent a few days without even eating anything, and he's super
yeah,
weak after.
I like to eat. I like to eat a lot. I like my food, and I think that if I was on a show like Alone, there's not a day I wouldn't eat. I think I would eat large quantities of food. I'd be willing to bet that it'd come back without losing a lot of weight. Very confident in that. I think it's definitely there's a lot of things that it's not just being able to hunt or fish. It's all the small things, right? Being able to properly prepare your food or preserve your food,
Yeah.
right? Because
How would you preserve the food outside? Is there a tool that you would get that would get that? That would be
well,
able
I
to
think
do
it's
that?
you have to preserve and you have to sort of protect it, right? So I think definitely like a food shelter would probably come before my shelter. If I was on the show Alone, I would definitely figure out a place and a way to protect my food from all the predators out there, because there are bears, there's raccoons,
Right.
there's foxes, there's all sorts of animals that will little scavenger animals that will try to steal your stuff. So definitely that's one thing, and then preserving it. You can dry, you can smoke, depending on the type of food that you have, and you'd have to. And again, on the show like Alone, you're only going for like 3 months or at the most, right?
It's
So.
like, that's nothing.
Yeah, 3 months.
Well, it's 3 months, but you don't need to preserve food for 2 years. And I think on that show they put you somewhere where it turns to freezing temperatures pretty quick into the show. I think like after like a month or a month and a half, it goes below freezing. So then you just, as soon as it goes below
Because
freezing,
you don't want to spend 6 months and then you can just kind of be outside and survive because
so-
of the
No,
weather.
They
You
want to make it a bit harder.
exactly. So you'll see if you watch a whole season, usually after like 4 to 6 weeks, it turns into freezing cold temperatures.
Is
and-
it only 3? You said about 3 months. Is that because people can only have only lasted that long?
That's because people have only lasted as long. I think there was one season where it was a 100-day challenge, season 7 or something like that. Now they're like 11 or 12 seasons, I think. And
They've been doing that for a while.
They've been doing that for a while. And this is the crazy part is they've been doing that for a while, and I only discovered that a month ago because I was so disconnected from.
Well, I never
stuff.
knew that existed either.
Yeah, my wife turned it on Netflix, and then I was doing work, so I was just going upstairs, grab a glass of water or whatever, and then she was like halfway through the first episode, so you just stand there and you watch, and then I was like, and I sit, and then I finished the episode, and I was like, oh, let's see the second one, right? And then it's just like, and then it was like, holy shit, it all came back, like in a snap of a finger, it all came back to me, like crazy stuff, yeah. And I had never really gone back on that mostly because I had never talked about it. Right?
Yeah. No shit.
So when you're like,
no,
I had never
suppress it, lock it.
Yeah.
Now you're moving
exactly,
on to what you're
and
doing.
then you're moving into other things in life, and you're sort of like not. But then when you start diving back into it, you realize that whoever you were, when you were a kid, it's part of who you are.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of lessons. There's a lot of values. There's a lot of stuff that when you dive back into your childhood, you can go and unlock some stuff, right? Figure out like parts of who you are that make you who you are today, right? Mm-hmm. And when you can put your finger on that and sort of point that out, then sometimes you can sort of like, figure out ways to change your life and improve it for things that are more in line with who you are, at your core, right? I don't think I'm ever going to go back to surviving in the woods as sort of like a thing. I still don't have an interest for it. I do have an interest on competing on alone, because there's money involved, right? You win $500,000 if you win. So to me, it just makes sense, It's
substantial,
and it's US.
And do that for three
US
for 3
dollars,
months.
so,
It's $500K in 3 months. It's a good.
It's
not bad.
I ran the numbers, and it not just that. I think you do get a lot of exposure. You get a lot of follow up things that you can do with that. And you can ride that. I think that if I could go on get on a show like that, I definitely want to ride the wave of wherever that could take me. Right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot that can come out of that, and if it's just for the experience and to dive back into sort of like things that I've done over and over and over again as a child, just that alone would be a lot of fun and probably a very nice adventure, right?
Wow,
yeah.
That's insane. Dude, we've been talking for like 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. It goes so fast, right? And there's so many places where we didn't go, right? It's like, yeah.
We've been talking for 3 hours plus the hour
No,
in
2
the
hours.
car. 2 hours?
Oh, well, and the car ride, yeah.
The car,
And
yeah.
The car ride too, and the car ride here.
And then we have all
You
the whole
said so
car
many
ride back.
things, yeah. So many things that we didn't go into. Is there anything else that?
Well, I think that
Wants to
there
know.
were a lot of like small adventures, sort of stories from over the years, right?
Yeah.
Things that I did, like even as a child, like I did like a lot of like adventures in the woods. I found I would walk entire days and I would find weed crops, and that was like when I was like 15. I was sort of rebelling. Right, so I would like go around and like sneak into like and these were in the wild. Like you're talking about on Crown land. It's a nobody land basically. Like
What is
no man's land. Crown land is land that's owned by the government. You're allowed
this
to.
is what you're mentioning earlier.
You're allowed
Okay.
to cut wood on it with permits
With
and whatnot,
permits.
or you're allowed
Okay.
for like natural resources essentially. So there were in the area, because logging was a very big business in the area. There were a lot of like side roads that were used for the logging industry, and then they would basically sort of shave down an entire mountain. Not necessarily shave it down, but they would cut a lot of wood, all whatever they could take from these massive areas. But all the roads would remain after they would be done with that area. So sometimes they would be logging for years, and then once that was done, then trappers, hunters, people would go fish, because sometimes you had these roads that would go for like
People are going to use it now.
yeah, exactly. Like you had these lakes that were not accessible before these roads came, and then people would start fishing in those lakes. It's very interesting. Like when you explore Crown land, there's a lot of stuff happening, but also a lot of bad stuff. Not anymore now that cannabis is legalized in Canada. There's no more room in the industry for that. But back when I was a kid, it was all illegal. So everything that was cannabis was grown in those areas. So we had these helicopters flying around every fall, because that's when the bud's happening on the cannabis, and they have these like heat sensors camera, so they can see, because it's the only plant in the wild that is actually like when the plant.
So not looking for people, but.
No, so when the plant produces buds, which are the flowers, the plant produces heat, and cannabis, the buds come in the fall, and all the other plants in the wild, most of the other plants in the wild, the buds or the flowers come in the spring. So, and also it wouldn't be as concentrated. You still have plants that bud in the fall, but not in large concentration. So they would fly over with military helicopters, and they had these cameras, and they could basically find areas where...
Infrared?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how it works, but... and if it was concentrated together, they could catch it. If it was spread out, they had a hard time catching it, but they were massive busts. Like when I was a kid, it was like in around the area. Yeah, we're talking like millions and millions of dollars worth of cannabis plants. Oh yeah, yeah. It was actually. I remember one year we had this massive bust, and they actually they didn't seize, but the municipality closed. There was a wood mill, and they had to close the wood mill to get rid of truckloads and truckloads and truckloads. Like they basically got these massive trucks, and it was all weed plants, and they would bust and sort of like destroy.
No way.
Because it was so much, right? And it's not like you're like the cops were not like seizing dry product that was being sold. They were seizing the plant, so they had to get rid of it. The entire village would smell. It was
everyone was high for 2 months.
Not necessarily, but you had that smell in the air. It was crazy. It was like the area was very, very rough. So yeah, we grew up like exploring, so that was like we were exploring everything. We were just going out in the wild and sort of like, going out on lakes to fish and up rivers, and you had all these things that you could sort of do. It was just endless, right? There was no limit to where you could go, so you could just go forever. You discover all these little lakes that nobody's been on, or not a lot of people have stepped around. Yeah, and wildlife is different as well, right? So it's a lot more wild, if you will, because it's not being as disrupted, right? So
what's your favorite memory of when you were back then? Do you know?
There's a lot of good ones. Yeah, there was a lot of good ones. Like all of these adventures were a lot of fun, and we were 3 brothers, so we had a lot of fun. We were just, we would climbing trees. We would build tree houses like in the woods. We would just create little dams on the little streams, and then
get to be boys in the wild.
It was this crazy thing. So again, it had there was a lot of different sides to it. I would go to school, sort of into modern society, and learn how to behave and learn how to work in society. And then I would go back home, and there were all the endless chores, because producing all your own food and sort of like, it's basically a homestead. You produce all your own food, all your own produce, all your own stuff.
So it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work. It's constant work.
Did you learn a lot of discipline, you think, from growing up that way?
Oh, definitely. I gained my work ethic, right? I'm a hard worker. I'm always the hardest worker in the room. And I definitely gained my work ethic from being raised that way. There was endless, the to-do list never ended. So, schoolwork, right? And then it was chores, especially in the summer. The summers were food production months, gardens, and, lots of work all summer long, because, you have to cut your own wood. You have to chop the wood. I chopped so much wood. As a matter of fact, it was my first job or business. As there were people that lived or had cottages up the road. So I painted a little sign, and I would sell a cord of wood is 4 foot tall, 8 foot long. And I would sell that $80 a cord. So I would cut my own wood, and I would chop it, and I would dry it. And, my first summer, I don't know, it's a lot of work. And I was basically like this, 14, 15-year-old kid, cutting wood and splitting wood. And then I put a sign by the road. And I didn't deliver it. People would stop. I told them, you got to stop and pick it up. Okay. Yeah. Because I'm just a kid here. And I was selling it for cheap. So there are companies in the area, a lot of people heat their cottages with wood in the area. So they are local companies that would they have machines and they have a business, and they actually split wood from they have this business. They sell a lot of wood, but I was only a small production, right? So I couldn't afford anything else to,
very good.
Yeah, if you want it, you pick it up, and I only got a couple clients. I didn't need more than that, but there was a sign by the side of the road, and I got a couple of people from Ottawa actually that had cottages up there, and they were going up, and then I had this relationship over the years as well with some of my return customers with my wood business. I didn't make a lot of money from it, but I started doing things.
The skills, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How many cords of wood were you doing?
Like, I think my first year I was probably like, I was 13, 14 years old, and I probably did like 10 cords of wood. So it wasn't like a huge amount.
But you were still making like $800,
yeah, $800 on the side, splitting wood.
You don't need to buy anything because you can make everything. It's not bad.
Exactly.
$800 is gonna go a long way.
True.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Especially as a kid, I mean, $800. At that age, you're going to high school, and you're sort of like
big lemonade stand.
Yeah.
So different kind.
So yeah.
And buy a lot of candies.
Yes.
A lot of candies. Yeah.
You're balling in high school with $800.
Yeah. From as long as I can remember, I was always doing something.
Nice.
I remember the year after I split wood for the first time. There was this guy. There was this. They call it the Black River Motel or whatever, but it's basically this camp up very, very far up in the woods, and they take people bear hunting. They take people up the river so that they can canoe down the river. So they rent the canoes and stuff. And it was like this little hotel. It's been there for a long time, and there's a lot of American tourists that would go there for bear hunting. It was a big thing.
Experience.
Yeah, for the experience.
Nice.
And I remember after he saw my sign and he stopped by, he said, "I'm not going to buy your wood, but I have a hell of a lot of wood to split." So I started splitting wood for him, and that was a lot of wood. I probably split there was one time I was working for $5 an hour in cash, and I was just splitting and piling probably 50 cords of wood in the summer. But it was a good job. It was a good job at that age. I was nice. Making money in my summer. I wasn't working all the time. Yeah. I did 1 or 2 days a week here and there because there was still a lot of work, in the property of my parents that I needed to do. So that's definitely where I developed my work ethic. Is I started learning, having to work from a very young age. We had to pull the weeds in the garden. We had to, I have pictures of me and my brothers where we're picking tomatoes, and we have those wheelbarrows full of tomatoes.
Well, no, because if you have an acre of garden, that's a fucking huge garden. There's a lot of work into that.
And everything you can think about needs to be done.
If you do everything by hands, holy shit.
It's a lot. We do all of our own compost. We had the animals. You got to keep it clean. You got to build fences. You got to keep the land clear because everything grows all the time, right? Split your wood. Carry buckets of water. That was a big one. Hunt. All the stuff that comes with it is massive. It's a lot of work, and that's why a lot of people, there's not a lot of people living like that, right?
Yeah, it's very hard.
It's very hard. Yeah.
Do you guys have kids?
No kids.
Yet.
Not yet. No.
Do you want kids?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Do you think?
When did you start to want kids?
I think I've always wanted kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always wanted kids. I think it comes at the right time in life, right? But yeah, definitely gonna have kids one day. I don't know when. We'll see. But it's definitely something that.
What were you gonna say, baby?
Yeah, the reason I ask is because of the background that you had growing up, and I know you're talking about coming down to Miami for at least maybe half of your year, in a few years. Do you see yourself having a ranch or something where your kids are learning these skills, or would you put them through that kind of experience, or no?
It's a good question. I don't think so. I definitely think I want a cottage, right, out in the wilds, but that's not necessarily that experience. Yeah. The only way you can really live that experience is to be 100% in it, which is a very crazy thing because you can go out there and sort of experiment with it and semi-live off the land, but, have gardens and things like that. But when you start doing that, it's a full-time job. So the only way,
even more than it's a life. It's a way of life.
Absolutely. Even having a backyard garden, which, I literally at home just took out my garden boxes because when the pandemic started, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have a couple garden boxes. That's I haven't done gardening since I was a kid, and I'm very good at it. And grow these crazy gardens in my backyard for the last couple of years.
I remember when you gave me tomato plants when I built my house
right.
in Chelsea.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. I gave
He gave me
plants,
like 15 tomato plants that I put on my deck outside. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of this thing, but then even just having backyard garden, it's like if you don't take care of it, it's not going to produce, right? So it's like everyday work. You have to kind of do something every day if you want to have a part of that lifestyle, whether it's gardening or another part of it. So I don't think you can really live both lives at the same time.
But maybe there's some things that you want to instill, like in your kids. Because I know you said you suppressed a lot of what you grew up, but at the same time, it sounds like a lot of those experiences affected like your business and things like that you do nowadays, or that you pulled
Absolutely.
into it.
I think that maybe I would want to give my kids or myself or other people. I mean, that experiences or any other experiences, right? I think that experimenting things in life, right?
Fair.
Living experiences. It's like for you, coming down to Florida and moving your entire life over there. It's an experience. It's like you're experimenting life. You're just letting loose and doing things, and I believe in that. And that's really sort of like
That's what you want to pass.
That's what I want to pass on. Yeah, I want to make sure that me or my family. I have a very adventurous lifestyle. I love to do stuff. I love I have great ideas, and then not necessarily great ideas. I just have ideas, and then I do things. So I like to be. I don't like to have limits.
The freedom to try
to try exactly and do things. So that's why Dale and I we went to live in Mexico for almost a year, and we just wanted to experiment things, and we were so happy. That was such a great experience living in Mexico or in a different country, and you're doing the same, right? So it's quite the process, and there, you learn new cultures and new ways of doing things.
And it's wild. I figured out I was an immigrant like super late. Like 8 months in.
Yeah.
I never thought about it.
It's when you really think about it, it's true. Yeah. You're like yeah. But I think if you do great things and you bring a lot of value to America, then
it's super nice to be here. It's so different. This is November 11th today, and it's 35 degrees outside Celsius.
Beautiful.
Which is dead summer, and in Montreal it's snowing, and it's so different, and I'm so grateful to be able to be here. It's amazing. Yeah. Oh, Simon, we need to leave the studio.
We need to wrap it up. Well, we'll do round 2 at some point. That was a lot of fun.
It was amazing. It was super cool. I was so excited to be able to do this, and super grateful that you decided to share the story. So thank you.
I wasn't sure about it. I actually decided that last night. I was like, what can I talk about? And I was sort of trying to sleep on it, and no matter what, I had a feeling inside of me. I was like, I think the best things I can talk about is just sort of my story, right? Yeah. I don't, I've been holding back sort of that part of me for 16 years since I left my parents, and even there before that, my friends in high school, nobody knew about that part of me, and I think that the more I talk about it, the more I dive back into it, and then the more I like sort of clue in on certain things, and the more value it brings. So very happy to share it, and it was a lot of fun.
That's so cool. I didn't think about the guest, because we don't script anything, so they're all thinking the day before what they're going to talk about.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't sleep last night.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us. Yeah.
Where can we find you? Where can you find the stuff? What's the next thing? Is this if there's something you want to promote? This is the time.
If you're looking to buy a house in Ottawa, or you're looking to sell a house in Ottawa, I'll be there. I definitely think at some point in life, I do want to share that story, and not only that story, but a lot of lessons and things that I've learned over the years. So my Instagram, Simon Danis, and that's probably the best way to find me.
How do you spell that?
Simon, Simon, and Danis, Danis. Yeah. So that's my Instagram. And otherwise, you know, I'll be around. So hopefully we can do another podcast and we can go a little bit deeper on some of the stories and some of the adventures.
This is one of the things that I'm so excited about with my friends is I'm gonna be here, and every time someone is in town, please let me know. We can hang out, we can talk.
Yeah.
Hopefully this gonna be a thing. You know, that we can continue doing. Hopefully we can have Dan here. It would be amazing to do one with you two. It was so cool at dinner with Kyle and Simon and Dan the other day in Ottawa. It was amazing.
Well, it's nice to have we can have some very deep conversation, and we all have, like, for our age, you know, at 32, you're 30 or 31, you know, I think we have a lot of history and lots of experiences.
We've been friends for 11 years, and it's 1/3 of our life.
Yeah, exactly. And we've all lived a lot of different experiences, you know, for our age, and we've you know, traveled and been around and tried a lot of different stuff and careers. So, definitely very interesting conversations.
Yeah, I was getting arrested here.
Can hear that in the background.
Okay, all right, we have to go. All right, ciao, everybody. Bye-bye.